The wonderful adventures of the Warhammer elf. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101 Giant Slayer. The sky full of split arrows shot at the sparrows like raindrops, instantly piercing through more than a dozen sparrows in the air. You refused to use the magic crossbow yourself, but I didn't say I wouldn't use it. Lysadillan looked at Ange beside him with a proud look, and did not forget to sarcastically criticize the other party's previous rudeness. Do you really think he has no temper and wants to be an unknown punching bag forever? Exclamation mark. After hearing Lysadillan's words, Ange's already gloomy face turned as hen. He considered himself the most elite warrior in Rohan, serving the Lord of Terror to whom he was loyal all the way. How could he allow an outsider to surpass him? After snatching the yew-bow from the follower, Ange drew out the arrow again and strung it, but Lysadillan would not miss this opportunity. Lysadillan slowly aimed the ruby in his hand at the fleeing sparrows, and the originally split red arrow immediately turned and chased the sparrows that were flying in all directions. Under this almost cheating method, the number of sparrows released is rapidly decreasing. Ange no longer cares about his dignity at this time. A faint white light shines from his eye sockets, which makes the onlookers Rohan secretly shocked. The blessing of the Mist Lady, you actually use it to shoot birds. Under the continuous competition between the two, the poor little sparrows are in the precise rain of arrows almost every minute and every second, and they want to escape but can't. It was not until the last sparrow with flexible movement flew 200 meters away that the two people in the venue stopped. This distance is completely beyond their ability. Just as the two put down their bows and arrows, a familiar bowstring sound suddenly came from behind. Bang! An ordinary and somewhat simple arrow flew over their heads and shot towards the sparrows far away in the sky. Everyone turned around and saw Rohan, who was glowing with blowlight, holding a longbow that he found from nowhere, looking into the distance expectantly. As a living saint plus fun person, Rohan would not mind the use of divine power. In the distance, the sparrows, who thought they were not threatened by arrows, were flying leisurely, not noticing the arrows coming closer and closer behind them. Puff. Okay, it seems that the championship of this competition belongs to me. Looking at the small black dot slowly falling in the distance, Rohan nodded with satisfaction and said to the two people below who had not yet reacted, I will plan to hold a competition in a while, and you can compete again when that time comes. Yes, sir. Ange heard that Rohan had something to ask them, so he nodded and agreed. There is a long time to come, and he has at least 9 ways to deal with this guy who made him lose face. 9 ways. And Lysadillan next to him would not have any objections. He had already received the respectful eyes of the surrounding veterans, which was enough. After taking the two back to the castle, Rohan first poured them 2 glasses of wine, and then sat in the main seat and asked Lysadillan, I heard that Unolda once served an elf race called Cinder. Is that true? I think you may be confused, my lord. The Nolda and the Cinder are actually the same kind of elves. The reason they are treated differently is that the Cinder elves are more talented in magic than the Nolda. Lysadillan took the wine glass handed over by Rohan and explained to Rohan while leisurely drinking the wine, as if he didn't care about his former identity. After hearing this explanation, Rohan lowered his head and thought for a moment. Isn't this an alternative caste system? Then, Rohan looked at the compound bow on Lysadillan's waist, pointed to the red emerald on it that emitted a dim light and asked, if your identities are distinguished according to magical talents, then what about the bow and arrow magic you just performed? A process similar to enchantment? This kind of magic arrow that can split reminded him of a woman with similar abilities, that is, the younger sister of the Witchland Twilight Sisters, Rohan. Although Rohan has not seen the Twilight Sisters in person, according to the battle report of Milas at that time, the two sisters have amazingly powerful bows. Among them, the bow used by the younger sister Rohan, Twilight Claw, is a terrifying weapon that can shoot dozens of split arrows. If this kind of weapon manufacturing method with a large coverage can be mastered, then in the future, Rohan can completely form a high-altitude strike force riding on manticores. After seeing that Rohan seemed to want the production process of this magic red emerald, Lysadillan couldn't help but touched the back of his head and laughed awkwardly. Ahaha. Actually, this gem was not mine at first. You also know that the reason why I was expelled was because I killed Aslandel's nephew in a duel. This bow is actually his nephew's. What? Exclamation mark. You killed the nephew of that lord, but not only did he not seek revenge on you, but he also let you take away the nephew's magic bow? Exclamation mark. According to the rules of the older elves, the winner of a duel has the right to take away the weapon of the loser, and Aslandel is a lord famous for his pursuit of fairness and justice, so after hearing Lysadelyn's somewhat guilty answer, Rohan couldn't help but take a deep breath. What kind of thing could only a great grudge do? If there really is a lord who pursues fairness and justice to this extent, then Rohan must consider his attitude towards this lord when he comes into contact with the older elves. Seeing Rohan sitting in the main seat in silence, Lysadilyn could only cover his head and drink the wine in the glass. After thinking for a moment, he replied, "My lord, I still have some friends among the Noldor. If you want to ask about magic items, I can notify those friends and see if anyone is willing to join your team. There is no rush for this matter. After all, our control has not yet expanded to the forest where the Noldor live. It will take at least some time to come into contact with your people." Rohan sighed, waved his hand to let the two leave, and then went back to the city lord's room to rest alone. In the room, Isabel was studying life spells. From her slightly wrinkled face, it was not difficult to see that she was in a bottleneck period just like Rohan. After lying on the soft velvet bed, Rohan complained to Isabel while flipping through the system panel. "After all, we are still short of soldiers and generals. Now I have too few elves, and your humans are too weak. The new recruits recruited by Pender are not formed yet. We are simply trapped everywhere. Don't you still have 1k? If it doesn't work, you can ask your Lord Witch King for help. I think he shouldn't mind expanding the territory in another world, right? Forget it. Unless I encounter a truly powerful force, I would rather believe that my own family will not ask for help from outsiders." In Rohan's eyes, the kingdom of Cloist, led by his beloved Isabel, is half his own family, so he would take them as cannon fodder when he went to war. Even though Isabel is still very weak now, and the combat effectiveness of the human servant she brought is also very worrying, they all belong to the family's troops and are safe to use. Although the Witch King has given Rohan a second life and taught him a lot of knowledge, he is ultimately just investing in him, hoping that Rohan can bring back treasures from another world. As for those sorceresses and witch priestesses, let alone, almost all of them are Morotha's spies, and the witch priestesses are lunatics who believe in Cain and cannot be trusted at all. Rohan finally eliminated these restless factors through the belief in the Lady of the Mist, and he didn't want to let the wolf in. Suddenly, Rohan had an idea, jumped up from the bed, excitedly hugged Isabel from behind and asked, "By the way, didn't I forget that there are giants in your world? How about we look for your ancestor's crown and control those giants to help us fight? P.S. Wow, my crib collapsed and my back was sprained cack." Chapter 102, Digging Graves. Hearing Rohan talking about the giants in his own world, Isabel instantly became interested. She turned her head and pretended to be angry and said to Rohan coquettishly, "If you didn't tell me, I would have almost forgotten. You lied to me and said you would take me to see the giants, but you still haven't told me where the magic beans are. Are you sure?" Hearing this, Rohan's face instantly showed a trace of confusion. Should I tell her that the magic beans are hidden in the graves of his ancestors, and should we go and dig up the graves? However, Isabel didn't care about these. She had longed for adventure since she was a child. She excitedly grabbed Rohan's arm and asked, "Hurry up and tell me. We agreed to go on an adventure to the Sky Island together. You can't regret it." Unable to resist Isabel's repeated requests, Rohan could only stand up from the bed helplessly, looking into Isabel's eyes and said, "You ask me to tell you this? According to legend, those magic beans should be buried in the coffin of your ancestor, King Eric, together with the crown that can control giants." What? Isabel's face was full of shock. The royal mausoleum was built near the sewer pipe of the castle, where she often played hide and seek when she was a child. Damn it, King Eric actually left such a good thing so close to her. He should have dug up his grave when he was a child. Isabel couldn't help feeling annoyed when she thought about how she had missed the adventure she longed for countless times. While packing her things, she said to Rohan, "Why didn't you tell me about this earlier?" Rohan didn't know that Isabel had no respect for the ancestor who lived hundreds of years ago. Seeing her face changing constantly, he thought she was angry with him, so he hurriedly explained, "It's okay, Lisa, if you don't want to, at worst we can. Hurry up and get ready, we'll go back to my world and then dump that old man Eric's grave together." After confirming that Isabel was not talking nonsense, Rohan hurriedly stood up and touched her forehead. After finding that everything was normal, he couldn't help but ask, "Isn't Eric your ancestor? Are you really going to go back to dig up the grave to find the magic beans?" "Yes, anyway, he is just an old guy who has been dead for hundreds of years. Can he still crawl out of the grave to beat me?" Isabel did not feel any remorse for her behavior that violated her ancestors. Instead, she asked back as a matter of course, "Don't you want to see how strong those giants are? And as long as you find the crown that controls the giants, you can control them to fight for you. It just so happens that our wedding is still missing a crown worthy of the king. Lisa, you are going to give me that crown." Looking at the undisguised love in Isabel's eyes, Rohan's heart was full of emotion, but also a little guilty. Such an innocent and pure princess. I used to shamelessly attack her and even deceived her. It was really so right, sister. Fortunately, he acted early, otherwise, when he thought that he might miss such a good girl, Rohan wanted to travel back immediately and slap himself a few times when he was still a little hesitant when facing Isabel. NND, don't hesitate, just hug her and kiss her. After biting each other with Isabel for a while, Rohan pushed open the door directly, picked up his sword and armor with a refreshed spirit, and ordered Anju, who was waiting outside the castle, "Assemble the guards. We are going to Sky Island to get the dowry and hunt giants." Hearing this, Anju immediately became energetic. He had heard about the legend of the Sky Island giant a long time ago, but he had never seen it. Now he finally has the chance. But then, he suddenly remembered something and hurriedly reminded, "Sir, most of the Mist Walkers are now outside training new recruits. If we want to fight against the giants, do we need to gather the Silver Mist Guards and return together?" No, if the plan goes well, we will be back in a few days. It will be enough to bring the guards and artillery troops. After thinking for a while, Rohan rejected Aang's proposal. After all, it was just to dig a grave and find giants, so there was no need to recall the troops. In just 5 minutes, the guards who were originally scattered all over the city returned to the castle. At the same time, 90 Franks also pushed 4 cannons to the door, waiting for Rohan's order. Rohan took Isabel's hand and came to the hall, shouting to these young men who had already received the order and were eager to fight. "Young men, don't get excited first. If nothing unexpected happens, we can't fight." "Hey," the guards booed instantly. They were originally looking forward to the exciting journey of hunting giants, but Rohan's cold water made them very unhappy. Hearing the boos, Rohan couldn't help rolling his eyes, but after all, they were all his own children, so he could only comfort them. "Don't worry, I believe there will be a few troublemakers among those giants, and then your weak Lord of Fear will have to ask you to protect him." Yes. One day later, in the palace of Lion Lake City in the Kingdom of Crost, several members of the Longbow Guard pursed their lips and watched the elves in the distance holding shovels and pickaxes and drilling into the sewers in silence. They all knew that the coffins of the kings of past dynasties were buried in the basement. Even though Her Majesty the Queen had informed them in advance, they were very dissatisfied and confused about this blasphemy. In the basement, Rohan looked at the clear river flowing beside him and curiously asked Isabel, who was leading the way, "Where does this river in your basement lead to? Shouldn't it be used to drain the castle's sewage?" "I don't know about this, but our moat is connected to a river, or this water comes from the moat." Isabel walked in front with a pickaxe, counting the year table on the wall while complaining, "Why don't I remember that I had so many ancestors when I was a child? And there are rats in this place. I don't want to be buried here after I die." "Don't worry, dear, I'm here. You can't die, even if you want to." Rohan, who was walking behind, took a shovel and kicked a passing big rat into the river. Looking at it struggling to be swallowed by the water, he sighed. When I become strong, I will let every ratman in the demon rat wasteland experience such despair. Although the curse of the horned rat has basically no effect with the help of the rebirth pill, it hangs in his characteristic column like dust in the corner, constantly disgusting him. I don't know how long we walked, but just when Rohan was sighing that the basement was a bit ridiculously large, Isabel, who was walking in front of him, suddenly stopped and shouted to Rohan in panic, "Oh no, Law. Eric's grave has been dug up in advance. Eric, oh no, I didn't expect that. P.S. My back hurts so much. Today is the second day of sleeping on the floor." Chapter 103, The Dominating Crown. Where are the crown and the magic beans? Did someone take them away first? Looking at the tomb that had been forcibly opened in front of him, Rohan's eyes trembled slightly, and he couldn't help but pat his forehead. Previously, because he was concerned that this was Isabel's ancestral tomb, Rohan did not arrange for people to dig the grave in advance, so he slowly forgot about it. After all, I was careless. I thought that my arrival and the king's death had ended the plot in advance, but I didn't expect it to go on inexplicably. After throwing the pickaxe in his hand to the personal soldiers, Rohan bent down and got into the dark tomb, ready to see what was going on inside. Because the light was dim, Rohan directly turned on the living saint form, and his body instantly burst out with a faint blue light, illuminating the entire room. In the room, a royal coffin made of golden nanmu had been forcibly pried open, revealing the dry skeleton inside. From the rotten clothes, embroidered with the royal lion head on the bones, it is not difficult to guess that the owner of this coffin is the owner of the legendary giant crown King Eric. Rohan went forward to check, and saw an obvious mark of strangulation on Eric's dry skull, and some torn and rotten hair scattered around. After putting on the gloves he had prepared in advance, Rohan checked King Eric's body, ready to confirm the time when the tomb robbers dug the tomb. As the eldest disciple that Master Kull, the Grand Master of Kane's assassins, was unwilling to admit, Rohan was quite good at this task of checking corpses. Outside the room, Isabel paced back and forth anxiously. Although she didn't mind opening the tomb of her ancestor Eric, this act of directly destroying the remains of her ancestor made her quite angry. After an unknown amount of time, Rohan finally came out of the tomb and handed a small bag made of gold thread to Isabel, telling her in a serious tone, the body was just destroyed recently. Apparently, the tomb robbers were in a panic and only had time to take the crown. We must know who has entered the basement during this period. After hearing Rohan's words, Isabel's pupils shrank, and she immediately understood what Rohan had handed over to her, so she hurriedly put the gold thread bag into her arms. It seems that the legend is true. The crown that can control giants and the magic beans that lead to the Sky Island really exist. Thinking that the crown that controls giants was stolen, Isabel hurriedly took Rohan out of the basement and then called the captain of the castle guard to ask, "Who has entered the basement recently?" "Basement? Your Majesty, the basement is usually inspected every 6 months, and the pipes leading to the basement are all over the castle, so we are not very clear." Faced with Isabel's inquiry, the captain of the guard was also helpless. After all, the basement is connected to the drainage canal of the palace, and no one would go to that place on weekdays. Rohan had guessed that this would happen, so he added, "Has anyone left the castle recently? For example, visiting nobles or diplomats from the other 2 countries?" There were originally 5 countries on the Albion continent, but due to Rohan's assistance to the Kingdom of Crost, the continent has now become a 3-kingdom situation. Rohan did not doubt the nobles who swore allegiance to Isabel. After all, according to Rohan's understanding, most of them were just pleasure-seeking people and had no reason to rebel. Because of this, he doubted the 2 countries that had united to keep each other warm. After all, only they had reason to pursue the power of giants. Hearing this, the captain of the guard thought for a moment. During this period, the other 2 countries sent a lot of diplomatic missions, but they all returned empty-handed because the queen was not at home. "Your Majesty, recently many diplomatic missions have visited our castle. One of them showed very strange behavior. They left after spending only 1 night in the castle." "Which country's mission is it?" "They dared to dig the royal tombs. I will make them pay the price." Your Majesty, it was a joint mission sent by 2 countries. Hearing this, Rohan's eyes narrowed instantly. It seems that stealing the crown of domination was not an independent action, but an act of the 2 countries. It seems that it is time to give this continent to Isabel as a gift. Inverness, the capital of the kingdom of Calantis, the perennial flying goose feather snow constantly hones this northern city. Although the living environment here is relatively difficult, it also shapes the tough character of the local people. In the carriage, Roderick looked through the window at the people outside the window who were wearing fur clothes and were very barbaric in both appearance and behavior. A trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. As the younger brother of the late King Carantis, Roderick was sent to the kingdom of Croas to receive education since he was a child. There, he first experienced the gap between his homeland and civilized countries. In order to change his tragic fate of not being able to succeed to the throne, Roderick even went against the ban and entered the interior of the monastery to look for abandoned black magic. Now he is in his 30s. As the younger brother of the late king, he is not qualified to inherit the throne of the country, so he can only look abroad with his eloquence. A year ago, he tried to propose to Princess Isabel of the kingdom of Croast, but was intercepted by Rohan, who showed up halfway. Later, after hearing the news of the death of the prince of the kingdom of Gus, he was ready to propose to the queen of Gus, who had lost everything. As a result, the kingdom of Gus was captured by Rohan, and even the queen was taken away by the elves as a slave. After experiencing all this, Roderick finally came to a conclusion. Elves are the biggest scourge of this world. And if you want to defeat the elves as legendary creatures, you should use the creatures that also exist only in legends, giants, to fight against them. The carriage slowly stopped in front of a palace. The voice of the servant came from outside, calling Roderick out of his daze. Lord Roderick, we have arrived at the palace. Oh, I see. Lord. One day, I want to see all the untouchables in the city kneeling on the ground and shouting your majesty to me. Slowly walking out of the carriage, Roderick, who was wearing noble clothes, could not feel the cold wind around him because the crown in his backpack was constantly warming his body. After passing through the antechamber closely guarded by countless guards, Roderick pushed open the door of the palace, and what came into view was dozens of nobles in a meeting. After hearing the noise, the young king who was explaining the situation frowned, looked at Roderick, who strode into the palace, and asked him, Uncle Roderick, it seems that living in the south for so many years has made you lose the etiquette of the northerners. Don't you know that you should inform the king before meeting him? Don't worry, my nephew king, I brought gifts this time. As he spoke, Roderick stood in front of the stage. This was the podium belonging to the king, and no one was allowed to go on stage without permission. Roderick didn't seem to realize his usurpation, but took out a rusty crown, put it on the podium, and shouted to the nobles who were talking below, Dear ladies and gentlemen, I have brought you an opportunity to defeat the elves, completely reverse the decline, and even unify the continent. Chapter 104 for humanity. What is this? A rusty iron crown? Is it mocking us? Sir Roderick doesn't look like a man who would make trouble. Is this the crown of a former king of Calantis? The nobles in the audience were talking about it, and the young king on the stage was livid. He had no good feelings for this uncle who suddenly appeared and had the right to inherit the throne. Seeing that the nobles seemed to focus their attention on Roderick, the young king hurriedly slapped the podium, trying to pretend to be solemn, and ordered, Uncle Roderick, this is the place where the nobles of the palace discuss state affairs. If you can't explain your stupid behavior, then I can only let the guards ask you to leave. Faced with the accusation of his nephew, the king, Roderick's face did not change. In the surprised eyes of the nobles, he calmly put the crown on his head. A dazzling light instantly lit up from the crown, and everyone present subconsciously closed their eyes. It was not until the light dissipated after a few seconds that they slowly recovered. Is that the crown that can control giants in the legend? A smart noble has already reacted. The legend of giants is a well-known story throughout the continent. Combined with Roderick's previous speech, it is not difficult to guess the origin of this crown. After taking in the expressions of the nobles below the stage, Roderick stood on the podium symbolizing the king and proudly introduced, yes, the legend is true. Whether it is Genshuakang Island or the terrifying giants, they are real creatures. and this so-called Iron Crown is the crown that can control giants, which was made by the ancestor of the kingdom of Croist, King Eric, using black magic. Wow, the nobles below the stage exclaimed. If what Roderick said was true, then it would be possible to defeat the elves and unify the continent. At this time, the young king sitting aside had also recovered from his brief blindness. Looking at Roderick, who was on the stage, to greet the attention of the crowd, his face gradually revealed a ferocious expression. Although Roderick was his uncle, the fight for the throne has never been about blood relationship, not to mention the rampant person who committed such an act of usurpation. Just as the atmosphere was getting weird, an old and respected earl stood up and asked Roderick with doubts, "I'm curious, Sir Roderick, if this is really the crown in the legend, shouldn't it be kept in the kingdom of Cloist? After all, according to the description in the legend, the crown should have been buried with King Eric, so how could it fall into Roderick's hands?" Hearing this, Roderick glanced at the young king beside him with disdain and proudly introduced, "This is all thanks to our king, who agreed to my diplomatic agreement with the allies, which gave me the opportunity to dig this crown out of Eric's grave." What? You actually dug King Eric's grave? How could his majesty agree to such an absurd plan? After learning that Roderick had dug up the ancestral grave of the king next door, many nobles who valued chivalry stood up to express their dissatisfaction and protest. After all, it is easy to imagine what diplomatic consequences would result from such a shameless act of digging up ancestral graves, if the kingdom of Cloist knew about it. However, Roderick didn't care about it. Looking at the excited crowd below the stage, he pointed at his crown and shouted, "I know what you are afraid of. The kingdom of Cloist is now powerful, and their queen has hooked up with the elves, far more powerful than us. But are we going to give up like this? Never. Think about what happened to the kingdom of Gus. Their capital and people were looted. The queen and princess became slaves of the elves. Do we want to let such a fate happen to us?" Roderick shouted from the bottom of his heart, and instantly quieted the male and female nobles who were arguing in the palace, thinking about each other's speeches. Although the cause of the fall of the kingdom of Gus was that Prince Gus assassinated the king of another country, which eventually attracted a revengeful army, the tragedy of the looting of the royal city still spread throughout the continent. The strength and cruelty of the elves far exceeded people's imagination. Naturally, the nobles present did not want their families and territories to be attacked in this way. Seeing that most of the nobles were impressed by him, Roderick continued to give his speech, constantly impressing the nobles present with his sharp eloquence and sophistry. "Albion is the home of our human race, but the queen of the kingdom of Croist betrayed us. She even wielded the butcher knife against her own compatriots, just to please those evil elves. In order to fight against evil, I don't think my behavior is wrong. With the crown, we can control the giants and take back the land occupied by the elves. In the future, we can even cross the ocean and spread the footprints of mankind all over the world. Think about it, compatriots, endless resources and wealth are waiting for us." Roderick knew very well what these noble grandfathers who claimed to be chivalrous needed, which was nothing more than a false sense of glory and real wealth. What else could be more honorable than saving all mankind and becoming a famous hero in history? As for wealth, most of the territory of the kingdom of Calantis is bitter and cold. The nobles have long been flocking to the rich and warm plains in the south. How could they miss such an opportunity? As expected, after listening to Roderick's impassioned speech, the nobles present stood up and shouted excitedly, "That's right. For the future of mankind and our families, we will never compromise. Those evil elves want to occupy Albion, then let them try. I will let them see whether my Highland battle axe is still sharp. It should have been done a long time ago. Those cowardly southerners actually gave so much rich land to the elves for nothing. It's such a waste." Looking at the excited nobles, the young king suddenly felt a little uneasy. Even at his coronation ceremony, he had never seen himself being so welcomed by the lords. Everything is Roderick's problem, and the crown on his head. Looking at Roderick standing in front of the stage, like a real king, the young king's eyes flashed with murderous intent. It seems that his cheap uncle cannot be kept. Just as the young king was thinking about how to get rid of Roderick, an old man in a red robe suddenly stood up and asked Roderick slowly, "I only have one question. Young Sir Roderick, where is the magic bean leading to heaven?" "My lord bishop, this is exactly why I came back. Because I was in a hurry at the time, I couldn't find the magic beans scattered in King Eric's coffin. As soon as the voice fell, the originally noisy venue immediately became quiet, and everyone looked at Roderick in the center of the venue. If there is no magic bean, then why are you talking for so long? Exclamation mark. PS. The heroine's avatar has passed the review, but it's outrageous that the hero didn't pass the review cac. Chapter 105. The King's Killer. Seeing that Roderick finally made a mistake, the young king reacted quickly, stood up excitedly and said, "So you were just talking big without any evidence? Now you have dug up King Eric's royal tomb, giving the kingdom of Croest an excuse to start a war, and you want to bring Curantis into the abyss." The young king's words made the nobles present react quickly and fall into thought. Yes, without magic beans, the crown that rules the giants is just a weird rusty iron crown. When they thought of this, everyone looked at Roderick with unfriendly eyes. Is it too late to tie this guy up and hand him over to the kingdom of Croest? Looking at the increasingly unfavorable situation, Roderick smiled slightly. He came back this time to solve the problem of magic beans. He took out a strangely shaped white book and put it on the podium. The cover, composed of clearly visible paws and sweat hairs on it, made every noble who saw it shudder. In the crowd, the cardinal frowned. He could feel an evil force that made him feel uncomfortable from this book. Seeing that the nobles had quieted down again, Roderick slowly walked down the podium, came to the nobles, and told their history that they were all familiar with a long time ago. Those monks who longed to see God use black magic to create magic beans, but finally arrived at Gancha, an empty island where giants lived. This is a well-known story. Later, King Eric asked the monks to use black magic and the heart of the giant king to create this ruling crown, so that the invading giants could return to Gancha. Has no one ever thought about where those powerful black magics were sealed? As soon as these words came out, the eyes of many nobles immediately fell on the cardinal. After all, those monks were monks from the monastery, and the monastery should have manuscripts about black magic. A gleam of light flashed in the cardinal's cloudy eyes. He looked at the white paper in Roderick's hand and said after a moment of silence, "I don't know where you found this book, but I hope you will never use it, because the reason why black magic is that its use is often accompanied by disasters." Yes, but now the pagan goddess temple occupies most of Albion, and the believers of Jesus are in tribulation. Do you want to see such a result? The cardinal closed his eyes and stopped talking. Although he didn't want this evil black magic to appear again, he didn't want to see the church destroyed in his hands, even if it means sacrificing a king. As the most senior bishop, he had guessed Roderick's purpose long ago, but he didn't want to stop the other party's idea. As Roderick said, the pagan beliefs brought by the elves are the biggest threat to the church. As long as the pagans can be eliminated, the secular king will die. He just wants to be the wife of the county magistrate. He doesn't care who the county magistrate is. After getting the tacit consent of the cardinal, Roderick smiled and opened the white book in his hand. The human skin used to make the cover not only did not decay under the baptism of time, but became exceptionally smooth. In fact, you don't have to be afraid of the power of black magic. Magic is fair. As long as you sacrifice some insignificant price, you can exchange for powerful power. As the white book was opened, a faint black shadow emerged from Roderick, and the gloomy and evil aura instantly lowered the temperature in the palace. Suddenly, a black shadow appeared behind the young king, and its sharp claws suddenly pierced his chest and grabbed his young heart. Before the nobles around him could react, the black shadow merged back into the ground and finally entered Roderick's shadow. To obtain the magic beans that can grow infinitely, you need to sacrifice a young soul, and I thought of you at the first time, my nephew. Looking at his nephew who slowly fell in a pool of blood, Roderick smiled and took out an ordinary pea pod to shout to the nobles who were in chaos around him, "Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome the new king to the throne together. Lake Lion City, Kingdom of Croest, can this thing really improve your affinity with plants?" In the palace, Rohan frowned and looked at the vines that kept wriggling flexibly on the walls around him and couldn't help but ask questions. Although Rohan had never seen other life magicians cast magic except Isabel, Rohan could conclude that this kind of vines like a sea of snakes was very wrong. In Rohan's impression, shouldn't life magic be a kind of full-time nurse, playing a supporting role? but looking at the vines in front of him, that could easily crush marble and cover the sky like a tsunami, Rohan fell silent. Look, Law. These vines are so obedient, just like a part of my body. On the other side, Isabel was having a lot of fun. A few days ago, when she tried to chat with the magic beans, she used a little magic to guide the magic beans, and the magic beans actually merged with her. If Isabel used to be a spellcaster who could only rely on the power of the wind of magic and the power of Lady Mist, then now she has truly become a life mage. Faced with this situation, Rohan, who was not a professional mage, naturally couldn't think of a way to deal with it, so he could only ask his Lady Mist, to see what to do. Looking at the slightly frowned willow eyebrows under the veil of Lady Mist, Rohan couldn't help but ask anxiously, Yuan Fang. Dear lady, what do you think? These magic beans will not affect Lisa's body, right? At present, there is no effect. Those magical seeds seem to be bound to Isabel's soul, and can enhance her affinity for plants. Is that so? Then keep them for the time being. After hearing that, Lady Mist thought that these magic beans had no effect. Rohan's heart, which had been hanging in the air, finally let go. As long as Isabel was safe, it would be fine. The problem of magic beans has been temporarily solved, so what is needed now is the crown that can control the giants. Since we don't know which country the thief from who stole the crown, we might as well take down all the remaining countries on this continent. With the powerful elf troops and a large number of human servants, Rohan can completely achieve success in one battle and completely unify the Albion continent as his perfect rear base. Speaking of unification, Rohan suddenly thought of the humans on the continent of Penda, especially those annoying snake worshippers, so he asked Rajlia curiously, Madam, what happened to the snake god that those snake worshippers believe in? Didn't you say you would get rid of him? Because the previous female snake god continued to erode the vitality of the Bacchus Empire, Rohan's territory was also affected, so he had to ask for help from Madam Mist. Now it has been nearly half a month. I think the ashes of the female snake god should have been scattered, right? Hearing Rohan's question, Rajlia once again recalled Damia, who died with hatred, and couldn't help but fell silent. P.S. Am I really bad at writing? Cack. Chapter 106. Lilith comes with bad intentions. Seeing that Rajlia seemed to be in a bad mood, Rohan couldn't help but guess what happened. It stands to reason that the female snake god who can absorb the power of believers is powerful, but Lady Mist has absorbed the power of faith from 3 worlds, and her strength should not be underestimated. Seeing that her thigh became irritable, Rohan, who was worried about Lady Mist, was afraid that something unexpected would happen, so he asked, Dear lady, your face is full of sorrow. If you don't mind, can you tell your loyal and lovely believer what happened? Hearing this, Rajlia couldn't help but look at this devout little believer, and couldn't help but recall Rohan's plan to fight against the chaos evil god. Although she was going to devour the faith of gods in other worlds in order to fight against the evil god, her recent growing strength did not bring her a sense of security, but made her very uneasy. Now she is constantly receiving the power of faith from 3 worlds every day, and the huge number of believers from other worlds has even far exceeded her believers in Iris. Compared to her uneasiness, Rohan, who was also getting stronger every day, did not react in this regard, which made Rajlia very confused. Although Rajlia could not understand Rohan's feelings as a Durichi, after putting herself in Rohan's identity, Rajlia was full of curiosity about his purpose. She could feel Rohan's sincerity, so she couldn't help but ask, I'm very curious. As a dreadlord under Malekith, you can stay in Nagaroth and live a comfortable life with peace of mind. Why do you take the initiative to take the responsibility of fighting against chaos? A Durichi, who has the ability to travel through the world, not only did not think about leaving this world threatened by chaos, but also tried to save the world. Is there anything more bizarre than this? Hearing the question from Lady Mist, Rohan hesitated. How should he say this? Should he say that he felt that he knew the almost shitty plot of it and wanted to try to save this desperate world? After thinking for a while, Rohan raised his head and looked at the mist lady in front of him carefully. He smiled and said until Rajlia felt a little shy, I'm different from my compatriots. Compared with their cold-bloodedness, my soul seems to be more flesh and blood. This allows me to understand some things that ordinary Durichi cannot understand. such as love and sympathy. Love? Sympathy? When Rajlia heard these words, her first reaction was to almost laugh out loud. If Tarachi could really understand these, the elves would not have split at all. However, after seeing Rohan's serious expression, Rajlia realized that this little guy was serious. Looking at the stunned face of Rajlia under her veil, Rohan shook his head, briefly introduced his own story, and then said helplessly, "Speaking of which, my experience is really fucked up. Sometimes I think that, if I had landed in Ulthuan or the old world, I might have been much better off than I'm now. Anyway, the 3 major elf tribes are originally one family. Even if I sell my body, I can still thrive in the other 2 families. It's nothing more than following Durachi, which requires selling one's body and killing people. Following Asur, which requires marriage and palace fighting. Following Asray, which requires learning to dance and performing sacrificial rituals." After listening to Rohan complaining about his experiences, Rajlia looked at the unfortunate man with sympathy, and then asked, "But you are in the society of Durachi, which is full of Uncle Kane's followers, and there is even a war madman acting as the king. Why don't you leave and go somewhere else? Malekith has been kind to me. What he wants is the Phoenix Throne and Ulthuan. I don't mind helping him, and I also need a safe territory to recruit soldiers." Rohan didn't think it was wrong to obey the orders of the Witch King. After all, it was his own will. Malekith taught him the methods and rules for surviving in this world, and helped him many times when he was in trouble. If it weren't for him, he would have died from falling from the sky by now. Looking at Isabel playing with butterflies in the distance and Rajlia floating in the air, Rohan's eyes flashed with a rare tenderness, and asked, "You have a lot of questions today, dear lady. Now you are as confused as I was 100 years ago. I don't know why I appeared in another world, and why I have to fight, right? Yes, the changes in just 5 years are too fast. I have become so powerful now that I'm even a little unclear about my purpose. Since you have become stronger, what is there to hesitate about? Don't forget that you are now a goddess with believers across 3 worlds. Even for those who pray to you, you have to work hard to become stronger." Looking at Rajlia in front of him who was lost in thought, Rohan's throat gradually rose. He knew that, as long as he could survive this confusion, the conditions for his god-making plan would be complete. When Rajlia becomes strong enough, Rohan, who has embraced her thigh, can safely carry it. It is even possible to let Rajlia replace Slanesh as in the plot of AOS. The anxious wait did not waste much time for Rohan. Ladelia's consciousness quickly came back from her contemplation, smiled at Rohan who had been waiting beside her, and then disappeared into the air. She was going to return to the Temple of Iris, sort out her emotions, and then kill the female snake god and devour her directly. Looking at the slowly disappearing body of the Lady of the Mist, Rohan knew that the most difficult stage had passed, so he took a deep breath. "Here's how it seems that my plan to create a god has been perfect." Warhammer World, Iris in the Temple of the Mist. Ladelia, who had just returned, was about to close her eyes and meditate for a while, digesting the power of faith absorbed during this period. She used to be just a dead goddess who stayed in Iris all day and didn't care about the changes in the world except for the responses of those believers. However, she is now far better than she was a few years ago. Even Lilith, whom she always hated, will probably be surpassed by her in a short time, right? Thinking of this, Rajlia even felt a little proud. After all, who can resist showing off in front of someone they hate? Take a good rest, we'll be busy next time. Just as Rajlia was about to close her eyes and take a good rest to conserve her energy for the next battle with the female snake god, she suddenly felt a familiar breath coming. After sensing the identity of the visitor, Rajlia opened her eyes abruptly, and a trace of disgust appeared on her beautiful face that was originally shrouded in a thin mist. It's Lilith. P.S. Welcome to join the group and discuss Lilith's tragic ending. Chapter 107. Rohan is targeted. On weekdays, Rajlia and Lilith's relationship is not very good. She always feels that there is a hidden malice in Lilith's eyes when she looks at her. It is this malice that makes Rajlia feel hostile to Lilith since she was born, even though she doesn't understand why. In the past, she didn't dare to take the initiative to provoke the other party. After all, compared with Lilith, who is believed by the 3 elves, the difference in strength between the two is still a little bit. But now, my lord, eat shit. Seeing that Lilith had no intention of notifying her maid, but planned to break into her bedroom directly, Rajlia's face did not change, but she had secretly prepared for a fight. The comer is not friendly. Rajlia, who was originally wearing a nightgown, waved her little hand, and changed into a solemn image of a white gauze, and holding a willow branch, calmly waiting for Lilith's arrival. Not long after, a pure-looking elf girl flew into Rajlia's temple. It was Lilith who broke into the temple without permission. Compared to Rajlia's hazy beauty, Lilith did not hide her beautiful face, proudly showing it to the world. Her long silver hair was as soft and smooth as moonlight, the ribbon wrapped around her hair was like the Milky Way of the evening star, and a headband made of mithril was hanging with a dazzling blue crystal like stardust, falling on Lilith's forehead. And the exquisite beauty under this gorgeous decoration is the true description of what is called a beautiful face. Her almond eyes were slightly moving, and her skin was as white and translucent as mutton fat jade, which was enough to make all the princesses of Ulthuan envious, not to mention her pure and lovely face. As the daughter of the elf father Azurion and the goddess of life Aesha, she could be called the elder sister of all the elves, so she was naturally qualified to be beautiful. Of course, this does not prevent her from finding her brother's brother as her boyfriend. After all, even bloody Cain, who is known as the Lord of Murder, would only blame her parents for their poor education when facing this lovely niece who often frustrated his sacrificial rituals. But this is the temple of the Lady of the Mist. In the eyes of the real owner, Rajlia, this rude behavior, that can be called invasion, is a complete provocation. Goddess of the moon, why don't you stay in the temple of Manslib, the moon, and be alone with your new boyfriend? Why did you come all the way to me? Rajlia politely asked Lilith, while secretly mobilizing the abundant divine power in the temple to prepare for the battle. Although her strength is not as good as Lilith's, this is her home court. If they really fight, it's hard to say who will win and who will lose. The majestic divine power slowly put pressure on Lilith. If the other party can't give her an explanation, then she will no longer care about the indifferent feelings in the past. If Rajlia was just a little surprised by Lilith's appearance, then Lilith was greatly surprised by Rajlia's change. Lilith slowly landed in the center of the temple, feeling the divine power around her pressing on her. She was secretly surprised that Rajlia had become so much stronger after just a few years of not seeing her. Sister Misty, I recently heard from Uncle Cain that you seem to have developed your followers' power into his territory. What happened? Lilith didn't seem to notice her intrusion at all. Instead, she took the initiative to bring Rajlia a cup of tea and asked with pretended curiosity. Rajlia didn't take the teacup handed by Lilith, but put it aside cautiously and also shook her head pretending to be helpless. Hey, I don't know why. There is a dreadlord who believes in me under Uncle Cain's command. He even took the initiative to spread my faith, which makes me helpless. Liar. Hearing this, Lilith narrowed her eyes slightly. She had seen the handsome boy named Rohan before, and even forcibly controlled the weak Redelia at that time, trying to trick her into joining her. However, the disgusting Durachi not only did not cherish the opportunity she gave him, but also made blasphemous remarks to her, which made her turn around and leave in anger. Now she seriously suspected that the hateful Durachi was actually deliberately arranged by Redelia in order to develop her own beliefs. Since Redelia refused to say, Lilith, who thought she had the answer, changed the subject, pretended to be innocent, and came to Redelia and asked in an admiring tone, I see, then Sister Misty, your strength has improved so fast recently. Is it also because of the believer who developed believers in Uncle Cain's territory? As soon as this was said, Redelia instantly understood the purpose of Lilith's visit this time. It turned out that she came to test her true and false. Seeing the hypocritical smile on Lilith's face, Rajlia didn't want to act anymore. A divine power no less than Lilith's instantly rose from her body, and a thick fog enveloped the entire iris. The elves in the iris region looked at the thick fog that suddenly enveloped them in horror. They didn't know what was going on, and could only sense that Lady Mist was in a bad mood through the thick fog. After sensing that Rajlia's strength was indeed about to surpass her, Lilith's smile gradually faded, and a hint of fierceness flashed in her bright eyes that were originally full of kindness. This was not in her plan. Originally, she came here just to see how strong Lady Mist was, but now it seems that the speed of this strengthening is too fast. There must be a secret. Raglia didn't know what Lilith was thinking. She looked at Lilith with a kind heart and couldn't help but persuade her. I'm tired of your poor acting skills. Please leave here immediately. After all, you are the goddess of the moon that everyone admires. No one will. Rohan, right? It seems that I underestimated his role. Lilith. This is my territory. You'd better be respectful. After hearing Rohan's name from Lilith, Raglia's heart instantly rose with an unknown fire, and even the thick fog around her was constantly torn apart by Raglia's anger. Compared with Eltharion, who had been serving her tirelessly, Rohan, as a senior believer, licking dog, was more favored and loved by her. Being able to take her to open up other worlds to travel around and explore various adventures is much more interesting than the boring life of staying in Avris before. Moreover, she had just finished a heart-to-heart talk with Rohan. The relationship between the two sides was already far beyond that of an ordinary god and believer. Lilith actually dared to take the initiative to provoke! Little swordsman, I warn you, if you dare to attract the attention of my believers, then I don't mind having a good fight with you right now. P.S. Does anyone like to watch two women, goddesses fighting? Chapter 108 Stealing a Man. Looking at Raglia, who was not disguising her hostility, Lilith's mouth corners slightly turned up, and a wicked smile appeared on her innocent face. Sure enough, the handsome little Durachi boy named Rohan was the key to the problem. Although she didn't know why mere Lord of Fear could greatly increase the strength of Lady of the Mist, she would never miss this method to strengthen herself. Thinking of this, Lilith's consciousness instantly left Iris. While looking for Rohan's trace, she teased Raglia, if you don't mind, can you tell me where you hid the handsome boy named Rohan? I want to be with him. You don't have that chance. Swordman. As Raglia scolded, the mist in the temple became thicker and thicker, and the divine power in the air made even Lilith feel uncomfortable. At this time, Raglia gathered the power of faith of the three worlds in one body, and the dense divine power continued to gather in the air, even forming a golden galaxy wonder. Feeling the dark golden fog around her, and the strong killing intent contained in the fog, Lilith, who looked down on Raglia, was not to be outdone. As the goddess of the moon, she has been receiving the prayers of the high elves and wood elves for thousands of years, so she is naturally not a powerless vase. However, since she usually uses a lot of divine power to find new worlds and maintain the image of the goddess of the lake, her strength is far from reaching her peak at this time. Sister Misty, although you have become a lot stronger during this period, you are not naive enough to think that you can beat me, right? The pure white dress slowly left the ground, and Lilith's body floated into the air again. At the same time, she waved her hand and summoned her magic, Lilith's scepter. Through the fog, Raglia could see Lilith's arrogant expression that made her disgusted, and then she saw the other party holding up the scepter, and a transparent ripple instantly spread out. The fog that originally filled the temple was swept away, revealing Raglia, who had been wearing military uniform and holding a slender willow whip. The fog that originally covered the sky above Iris was also slowly dissipated, replaced by holy moonlight that penetrated the thick fog and shone on the land of Iris. A soft moonlight passed through the gate of the temple, perfectly highlighting Lilith's exquisite body under her thin white dress. Isn't it just the home advantage? Can't I just turn your home court into my home court? The elves living in the Iris region looked at the changing visions in the sky in confusion. The changes just now were undoubtedly miracles, but it was precisely because of this that they were even more confused. What's going on? The fog just now was the protection spell of the Lady of the Mist, right? Why was it suddenly dispelled? Did an evil god invade and dispel the protection of the Lady of the Mist? The moonlight, is it the moon goddess Lilith? But why? Faced with the various strange phenomena that suddenly appeared and disappeared, the elves who didn't know what happened could only guess in vain, and some wizards who barely guessed what happened couldn't understand. Obviously, these two goddesses are gods in the sky who protect the elves from outside invasions. Why did they suddenly fight? Where is the god King Azuran? Why didn't he come out to stop all this? How could these Asur wizards who kept guessing have expected that these two respected elven goddesses were constantly fighting for a Durachi believer? As for the god King Azuran they were looking forward to, he had noticed this battle as early as the beginning, but he didn't mean to intervene at all. As a Buddhist Otaku God King, as long as the two sides don't cause trouble, then let it go. The two people in the temple obviously know this, and Lilith naturally needs no further explanation. After all, she still has to give face to her father. Don't tell me about the relationship between the gods anymore. I have been looking for a long time, and even the setting of Lilith being Azuran's wife has come out. Anyway, let's just follow the father and daughter now, because Azuran warned her not to kill. Rajlia, who used the willow whip to fight, quickly took advantage of the environment and left red marks on Lilith's fair skin. And whether it was intentional or not, Rajlia's willow whip always whipped her delicate buttocks, which made Lilith very angry. Seeing Rajlia constantly using mist and phantoms to avoid her magic, Lilith flashed a sinister smile on her face, and she pretended to be angry and cursed. HMPH. Don't think that you can be so reckless with your father's warning. Watch this. Then she rushed towards Rajlia with the scepter in her hand, and at the same time, the staff in her hand emitted a strange light, as if she wanted to decide the outcome with Rajlia in one move. Rajlia frowned slightly. If she was the newbie with zero combat experience, she would probably be ready to rush up and fight Lilith at this time. But after observing Rohan's battles in the other world several times, she was quite interested in Rohan's style of play, which was although vulgar, but had a higher return rate. After several patient observations, Tauki, although Rajlia's combat experience did not improve much, she had learned to fight with her advantages instead of simply rushing forward. Now her strength is still far behind Lilith, who has absorbed faith for 10,000 years, and head-on confrontation is not her strong point. As for her own advantages, as the patron saint of lost things and travelers, what she is best at is smoke bombs and opening portals. After thinking for a while, Rajlia lost interest in this meaningless fight. Although she hated Lilith, it did not mean that she wanted to kill her. Looking at Lilith flying towards her, Rajlia decisively opened a portal to the world of Rohan and prepared to leave. I won't wait for you anymore. Lilith, who was accumulating a big move, looking at the portal that suddenly appeared, Lilith's face changed. She thought of various ways to defeat Rajlia head-on, but she never thought that the other party would leave directly without honor. Can't let her leave. Seeing that Rajlia was about to leave, Lilith didn't care about anything else. She closed her eyes and began to activate the seal that had been left on the other party. When Rajlia was still weak, Lilith had injected a wisp of her consciousness into the other party to control the other party's behavior. As Orion was watching the battle, she did not use this sign to avoid being hated by her father, but now she can't care so much. As Lilith's consciousness began to impact Rajlia's soul, Rajlia's original action of entering the portal stopped instantly, and the whole god stood there blankly. Looking at Rajlia with a dull look in her eyes, Lilith breathed a sigh of relief, and then hurriedly took the other's body away from Iris. Don't worry, when I find the reason why you become stronger, I will release you. Of course, as a part of me. P.S. After discussion among group members, Lilith's disposal methods may be as follows. 1. Soak in wine. After all, bath water is so strong, isn't it wonderful to soak in wine? 2. Muse and training, most votes. 3. Clone, and then distribute to officers as portable hot weapons. It has to be you. 4. Dissection. What is the use of the flesh and blood of God? If Khan doesn't obey you, I will obey you. There are only a few ways at present. Welcome to join the group to discuss. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109, Panda Servant Army. Rohan didn't know that he had been targeted by Lilith. After all, he once thought that the two gods were the same, and he didn't expect that the other party would suddenly attack his main god. Because they were separated by two worlds, Rohan had no idea of the battle in Iris, nor did he know that the Lady of the Mist had been sealed at this time. At this time, he and Isabel were gathering the army, preparing to completely unify the Albion continent in one go. Pend Continent Imperial Port in the central square, Dario was reviewing nearly 10,000 Penda soldiers lined up in an orderly manner. Looking at the excited expressions on the faces of these human servants, he was filled with emotion. Once upon a time, he was just an ordinary garrison captain in Grand Town, but now, he has become the administrative governor of Imperial Port. Crack, crack, accompanied by the familiar sound of broken glass, Dario pointed to the dimensional crack that was slowly tearing the space in the square, and ordered the somewhat restless crowd behind him. Remember your mission, listen patiently to the prayers of the monks. For the glory of the Lady of the Mist, march towards death. For the lady. The soldiers were excited, waving their shields and hammers wildly, and couldn't wait to go to the other world to spread the faith for the Lady of the Mist. Under the guidance of the Mist Walkers, they have been through months of hard training, fighting with the believers of the snake cult almost every day. Although the mortality rate of the battle was reduced by the potion provided by Rohan and the recovery magic of Isabel, the high-intensity bloody fight was still difficult for some human soldiers with fragile hearts to accept. They used to be just some poor farmers and zionaging citizens. Their daily routine was just farming and selling goods, and they never participated in battles. In just a few months, they had to execute refugees who were involved with the snake cult every day, and fight desperately with those powerful snake cult warriors. Even though the training of Druki can quickly build a strong body, they still need to slowly find spiritual support. After all, they are just humans. Killing several or even dozens of compatriots every day puts them under tremendous psychological pressure. Physical injuries can be healed quickly, but psychological scars are not within the scope of healing potions. However, Rohan also has his own solution to make up for the spiritual vacancy of human soldiers. In the square, hundreds of human monks wearing white-bottomed black cross robes and Druki plate armor lined with the mark commanding the team. They are the political commissars found by Rohan. It is not difficult to see from their unique elf costumes and fine armor that they are the elites of the human servant army, commonly known as senior soldiers. These human monks are carefully selected by Rohan from the local Knights of Penda. They are the earliest devout believers of Lady of the Mist. Their combat effectiveness and credibility are far superior to ordinary servants. Because they were born into aristocrats, these devout human believers even refused the generous salary provided by Rohan, and took the initiative to come to the grassroots to preach, which moved Rohan deeply. It would be great if there were more people who are selflessly giving. At this time, these monks were constantly shuttling in the team heading to the other world, and advised the soldiers who were full of fear of the unknown world, relax, compatriots. Those mist walkers blessed by the lady are watching us. We can't lose face for humans in front of the elves. The mist lady must be paying attention to this expedition. Let us fight for the lady's glory. The lady's divine power protects our families, so we should also repay the lady with loyalty. The monks' passionate shouting quickly dispelled the fear in the hearts of the soldiers, and they bravely stepped into the dimensional crack with purple lightning. Kingdom of Crowist, outside Lion Lake City. Yes, the express package has been received, and the items are intact. Looking at the pen servants passing through the portal intact, Rohan nodded with satisfaction, threw the paper airplane in his hand through the portal, and handed it to Dario on the opposite side. That was the city development route that Rohan arranged for Dario. Currently, the priority was to recruit soldiers and strengthen the city defense to defend against the attack of the snake cult. Now the snake cult was stirring up trouble everywhere. There were hundreds of thousands of poorly equipped snake cult believers in the Bacchus Empire, who were simply the best training targets. After resolving the war here, he would be able to free up enough troops to fully support the war in Penda. By then, Lady Mist would cooperate with him to launch an attack on the snake cult, directly kill the female snake god, and unify the entire empire. Wouldn't it be wonderful? In Lion Lake City, the citizens who had been notified in advance came to the streets spontaneously, looking at these burly aliens curiously. Since this world only had the continent of Albion, these Penda people were the first people of their own race they had come into contact with. Look at this sturdy physique and developed muscles. It's even stronger than my cow. Hubby, look at his muscles. His arms are as thick as your thighs, right? What's the use of being thick? Maybe it's just for show. When I was young, I could beat two people at once. Compared to the citizens who were curious about the physique of the Penda people, the local nobles' eyes were completely focused on the weapons and armor of the Penda soldiers. Unlike the ordinary citizens who were blocked from information, they had already heard about how many casualties the first expedition had suffered, which made these proud nobles unacceptable. Looking at the simple equipment on these Pender soldiers, the nobles standing in the distance with telescopes could not help but sneer. I heard that even the members of the royal knights who joined the atonement camp were wiped out in the first expedition. I thought the other world was so strong, but I didn't expect the equipment to be so simple. The conscripted troops from the Gus region also suffered serious damage. Are they too weak? The noble knights who acted with the elves did not suffer too many casualties. It seems that such heavy casualties were caused only by the commander's mistakes. These stubborn nobles did not know that any one of the Pender troops who were ridiculed for their simple equipment could beat 3 of them. These nobles who were constantly making taunts did not notice that Rohan, who was standing not far away, had a gloomier look on his face. Simple. How is it simple? This is a cost-effective suit that I carefully selected. Hearing the taunts of these nobles, Rohan had the idea of killing them in his heart, because these so-called simple equipment were provided by him. Since the previous vassal army was the noble army of Albion, he did not need to provide additional equipment and weapons. The weapons and armor on Durachi were all purchased at a low price by Rohan from the armory of Naga and by virtue of his position as the Lord of Fear. However, since the entire Durachi society is now at war, coupled with the restrictions of the Witch King, Rohan can only purchase equipment on his own at this stage. The arsenal of the Bacchus Empire was burned clean by 1K in the previous war, resulting in Rohan not being able to gather enough equipment for a while. Thanks to the many spoils of war looted in the war with the Snake Cult, plus the Bretonnian chainmail purchased from Karandkar, Rohan finally gathered all the equipment for his Pender army. Looking at this group of nobles who know nothing and like to talk nonsense, Rohan curled his lips in dissatisfaction and prepared to find an opportunity to teach them a lesson. Look down on my vassal army, wait for regret. Chapter 110. Girls are evil and boys are. Fortunately, these nobles were just talking nonsense and did not really cause trouble for Rohan's management, and Rohan was too lazy to pay attention to these nobles. Compared with the weak and scheming human servant army in the giant catcher world, the soldiers from Pend were the soldiers that met Rohan's expectations. Since Dario was not around, Rohan had to go out in person and came to the Pend soldiers who were curiously looking around and introduced with a smile. Welcome to the new world, warriors of Pend. This is a continent that is about to fully accept the faith of the Lady of the Mist, and it will also be the future appearance of your home. In the next few days, you can go around and experience the life of this world. After all, in the future cruel wars are waiting for you. After all, this is a peaceful world with no foreign gods, except the Lady of the Mist, and due to Isabel's management over the past few years, even robbers are almost extinct. Compared with the Pend continent, which has been in turmoil for hundreds of years due to war, this is simply a paradise on earth. After hearing that they could relax, the Pender soldiers who had been fighting for months cheered and praised Rohan and Lady of the Mist. After confirming that all the Pender soldiers had arrived, Rohan closed the portal and prepared to return to the castle to discuss the next war with Isabel. These thousands of mouths that have been added out of thin air need to be properly arranged. At this time, he did not notice that on the ridge in the distance, the afterglow of the sunset had not completely fallen, and the full moon, that was almost transparent, had quietly risen. A few hours later, in the castle, 10,000 words of extra chapter omitted. After a night of passion, Isabel had already fallen asleep with a sweet smile, and Rohan came to the window with a glass of milk, looking at the sky helplessly. The physique of the living saint was so abnormal that, when he was doing serious things, he still had to worry about whether Isabel's body could bear it. Not to mention that he also had the terrible 55% special protection aura. Why did he have to protect this aspect? Exclamation mark. Although the matter was done, he still felt a little uncomfortable. This feeling of not being able to completely satisfy him made him itchy all over. After all the logistics and supplies are ready, I must tear a few giants apart to vent my anger. After looking at the cloudless sky, Rohan thought of the giant sky island and couldn't help cursing viciously. I really don't know how these giants make the island float. If I can figure it out, can I also make my black ark float? Just as Rohan fell into his daily daydreaming, His peripheral vision suddenly noticed the perfect full moon in the sky. The bright moonlight shone on him, making him feel an unprecedented purity, as if to dispel the evil in his heart. Looking at this bright moon, Rohan suddenly felt unhappy. This thing reminded him of the little swordsman Lilith. Thinking back to when he was almost fooled into drinking foot-washing water, Rohan felt scared. Fortunately, that guy didn't come to harass him again, otherwise he would be annoyed enough. After jumping onto the roof several meters high, Rohan climbed to the highest point of the castle and had a panoramic view of the beautiful mountains and rivers around him. Under the moonlight, the entire Lion Lake city seemed to be covered with a silver veil. The citizens who occasionally passed by on the street were like hard-working little ants, contributing gold coins to him one by one. After taking a few casual glances in the city, Rohan's sight returned to the moon. Today's moon seemed to attract him like magic, which made him particularly confused. If this kind of thing happened in the Warhammer world, he might understand it as the will of some god. But Lady Mist searched this world herself, and there really was no god in this world. The god related to the moon. The first god Rohan thought of was Lilith, and the disgust in his heart rose again instantly. Looking at the bright moon, Rohan decisively came to the tower and took off his pants. After a while, there was a sound of gurgling water. Lilith, you little swordsman, let me show you my cannon. Rohan squinted his eyes, enjoying the unbridled happiness. In a trance, he seemed to really see a figure riding a Pegasus on the moon. Rohan thought it was an illusion, but at this time he was holding the cannon with both hands and had no chance to rub his eyes. Fortunately, he just let it go. What are you afraid of? Could it be that Lilith can really come to this world and beat him up? It was not until the figure in the air got closer and closer that Rohan realized something was wrong. It seemed that there was really a woman on the horse. Thinking of this, Rohan decisively accelerated the work and then hurriedly pulled up his pants to prepare for battle. Although he did not carry any weapons with him, he was now a super warrior who practiced both magic and martial arts. How could he take the initiative to be beaten? As the magic power in his body continued to gather, Rohan's hands gradually lit up with blue light, and then he shouted at the figure in the air, "No matter what you are, try this first, storm magic." The beautiful figure in the air immediately waved the scepter in her hand, as if confidently preparing to take on the weak storm magic, and then saw a blue fireball flying towards her. It's soul-quenching. Rohan knew in his heart that no matter who the opponent was, soul-quenching, a magical penetrating attack that could tear the soul apart, would always be effective. Come on, little fireball, it must be effective. However, the woman on horseback only waved the scepter, and the soul quenching, which was always invincible in the past, was easily blown away in front of the Pegasus. Seeing this, Rohan hurriedly took out a short sword from the system space. Although the quality was not as good as the Shangfang sword, it was also a high quality weapon drawn from the card pool. The opponent is a mage. As long as we find a way to get close to him, close combat will be in our favor. However, before Rohan could figure out how to fight in close combat, the woman on horseback suddenly pointed the scepter in her hand at Rohan, and then a wave of transparent ripples came. Rohan looked at the ripples vigilantly. The range of the ripples was so large that he could not avoid it, no matter which direction he dodged. Since he couldn't avoid it, he would just bear it. After making up his mind, Rohan condensed a magic shield with 80% of his magic power in his hand, trying to block the attack. He had full confidence in this shield, and he could even resist the black magic released by Morathi. Then, it was gone. The ripples directly penetrated the magic shield, and Rohan didn't even have a chance to react. He concentrated his body in an instant and lost consciousness. After a while, the Pegasus with white wings came to the top of the castle. The woman on horseback looked at Rohan, who was unconscious on the ground, and a lovely smile appeared on her lips. Although she was not proficient in this kind of portal to a distant world, she still found the coordinates of this world by absorbing the consciousness remaining in Rajlia's body. The woman first looked with some surprise at Rohan's body, which became more handsome as he became a living saint. She licked her lips excitedly and said, "Handsome boy, we meet again. I won't let you run away this time." The person who came was Lilith. Chapter 111, No Miserableness. After an unknown amount of time, Rohan regained consciousness. He couldn't help but blink as he looked at the fairyland-like palace around him. Wow, where am I? His centuries of combat experience made him subconsciously ready to reach for his waist, but the restraints on his hands and feet woke him up, and he turned his head to check his situation. The empty palace was filled with silvery white stars, which looked particularly sacred and pure under the moonlight, but this did not affect Rohan's hatred for the owner of this place. Not to mention that the other party had captured him, but now he dared to humiliate him like this. All his clothes were stripped off, and he had nothing but a pair of shorts to maintain his last dignity. The lonely cold wind blew along his thighs, making Rohan shiver subconsciously. Most importantly, his limbs were all tied with silver chains. As an alchemist, he recognized at a glance that the chains were made of expensive mithril. This kind of silver has strong defensive and magic blocking abilities. It is a high quality material that the dwarves dug out from the deep mountains to make armor and shields. Such a rare material is now used as a chain. Looking at the oversized chain that imprisoned him, Rohan's mouth twitched slightly. Now he couldn't use any magic at all. Moreover, he hated it most when someone used chains to torture him. It's better not to let me know who did it. 100 years ago, he was kidnapped by the cult of pleasure who believed in Slanesh while shopping. Then he was chained and tied to the altar like now. And now, someone dared to restrain him with such a shameful prop. He was simply tired of living. Rohan cursed in his heart. He had always been cautious in his style of doing things. He didn't expect that he would be forcibly overturned this time. Who could make him unable to fight back? Since Rohan didn't know where he was or who caught him, he only knew that he was caught by a female mage riding a Pegasus. Morathi? No, her horse is black. Could she be a wizard from Ulthuan? Speaking of women riding Pegasus, the first person that Rohan thought of was Morathi. After all, Pegasus was her iconic outfit. However, every time the portal opened and closed, Rohan would vigilantly check it himself, and no matter how strong Morathi was, it was impossible for Rohan to not notice it. Moreover, the other party was riding a white Pegasus, and the white robe she wore was obviously not in line with the character of Morathi, who was as chaste as jade. After thinking for a long time, Rohan really didn't know who had caught him, so he simply gave up thinking, closed his eyes, and began to summon the system. Are you there? Are you there? Can my blessing spirit potion still be used? Ding. This system does not provide feeding service. Please solve it yourself. If I could move, would I need to ask you? Rohan swung his arms with all his strength, trying to move his arms in front of his mouth so that he could directly summon the blessing spirit potion and drink it. However, even though the chain rustled as he swung it, it still handcuffed his hands, and the other end was still firmly connected to the wall. Looking at the wall made of unknown material, Rohan couldn't help but curse. What the hell is this wall made of? I can't even pull it apart. The curses and the sound of the chain finally attracted the attention of the owner of this place. A white figure slowly walked into the palace, attracting Rohan's attention. It was a snow-white Pegasus without a single color on its body. Although Giant Catcher World does have fantasy creatures like giants, Rohan doesn't think this Pegasus is a local creature. Looking at Rohan, who was handcuffed by the chain, the Pegasus' big eyes were filled with a little doubt, and it came to Rohan curiously. Rohan's eyes were full of vigilance. Although he had never come into contact with Pegasus before, as an alchemist, he would not underestimate any magical creature. Looking at the Pegasus gradually approaching him, Rohan tried to recall which magician of Ulthuan he had provoked, and tried to put on a friendly expression and said, "Hello, little guy, where is your master? Little guy? Sindmar is hundreds of times older than you, little guy." A voice full of innocence came from behind Rohan. If it were an ordinary person, he would definitely let down his guard after hearing such a voice. However, for Rohan, who is a living saint, he could immediately tell that this voice has a magical power, which made him feel particularly disgusted. She dared to pretend to be pure like this. She must be a shameless old woman. Hearing this voice, Rohan's heart was immediately filled with malicious joy. He didn't know that he had guessed it right. Not long after, an elf girl holding a cup of water came to Rohan. Her innocent and lovely face showed a smile, and she asked playfully. The handsome boy finally woke up. "Do you want to drink some water and rest? Who are you?" Rohan didn't even look at the cup of water handed over by the other party, but looked at the unidentified delicate girl with a scrutinizing eye. He didn't believe that the other party came to give water out of kindness. The elf girl who came to give water was Lilith. By absorbing the divine consciousness buried in Rajlia's body, Lilith accidentally found the coordinates of this world and happened to find Rohan, who was rushing to the crescent moon sky. After hearing Rohan's question, Lilith's smile on her face did not change. Instead, she looked at Rohan's flawless muscles with interest and exclaimed, "We met once before. At that time, you were still very thin. I really didn't expect you to become so perfect." Met once. Rohan narrowed his eyes. If he really met the other party, he would never forget it. This means that the previous meeting between the two parties took place without Rohan having seen the other party in person. Looking at the other party's white dress as soft as moonlight, and the white Pegasus sitting cross-legged on the ground cleaning its feathers, Rohan suddenly opened his eyes. This woman is! Exclamation mark. After seeing the shock on Rohan's face, Lilith nodded with satisfaction. When she was about to say something, she suddenly heard Rohan's national quintessence, asterisk asterisk asterisk. Lasting for several minutes, the sudden obscene words made Lilith stunned in place, looking at Rohan's hideous face, and she didn't react for a while. He just scolded me? He dared to scold me? Exclamation mark. As the jewel in the palm of the entire elf world, Lilith had never been humiliated like this, let alone in front of her. Seeing Rohan's handsome face twisted due to anger, Lilith's temper also surged up. However, when she thought that Rajlia had been sealed by her, and Rohan was just an elf without any resistance, Lilith's mood instantly became cheerful. At this time, Rohan's constant curses were as cute as a kitten with its fur standing up, after being frightened in her eyes. "Humph, this is the second time you have made blasphemous remarks to me, but the merciful goddess will always forgive the lost lamb." After slightly hooking Rohan's chin with her fingers, Lilith sneered at the corners of her mouth, then waved at Rohan and directly untied the chains on his body. From Rajlia's consciousness, she already knew the magic of Rohan. This is an interesting existence that can travel through another world and break the cycle of reincarnation. Thinking of this, Lilith looked at Rohan with a greedy look in her eyes. Such a priceless believer was actually found by Rajlia first. What a waste. If she could turn him into her believer, she could greatly increase her chances of winning against chaos, and even become the creator god of the new world. But now, looking at Rohan, who summoned a silver sword out of thin air after landing, Lilith's mouth curled up a sweet smile again. The little guy's not obedient, he needs to be disciplined first. Chapter 112 Footbath water delivered to your mouth. Rohan didn't know how Lilith found him. After all, they were separated by two worlds. Without his active guidance, there was no way to find this place. But after understanding the other party's identity, Rohan's first reaction was that something happened to Lady Mist. After all, as the first living saint blessed by Rajlia in history, Rohan still has a certain unilateral communication ability. From being knocked unconscious by Lilith to now, he has never stopped praying to Lady Mist in his heart, but he has not received any response so far. This is obviously abnormal. Lady Mist will not easily give up her believers' spare tires. Combined with Lilith's sudden appearance and the act of knocking him unconscious, Rohan has no doubt that the other party did it. Damn, it's still too early. When Rohan thought that his god-making plan was finally on the right track, but now it turned to an unknown direction because of Lilith's interference, his heart couldn't stop twitching. What if his plan failed? Do you have to rely on you, Lilith, who is causing trouble everywhere, to save the world? Exclamation mark. Seeing the sweet smile on Lilith's face, Rohan chose to make it clear, suppressing his anger and questioning. Lilith, right? Where is the Lady of the Mist? What did you do to her? Oh, you mean her? Of course I sealed her up. If I hadn't kept a trump card in advance, I might not have been able to get rid of her. Lilith did not hide her dirty tricks. In her opinion, the situation had completely fallen into her control, and the Lady of the Mist had no chance of turning the tables. This wave is 800,000 and 600,000. The advantage is mine. Seal. After learning that the Lady of the Mist was only sealed, Rohan stopped cursing. After all, as long as she was still alive, there was still hope for revenge. How you care about her a lot. Have you ever thought about what to do with yourself? Looking at Rohan, who was obviously relieved in front of her, Lilith was a little unconvinced. What benefits did Rajlia give him to make Adarachi so pious? But then, Lilith's eyes were attracted by Rohan's handsome appearance, and the unhappiness in her heart was forgotten. Hehe, even if this handsome boy is devout to Rajlia, what can he do? Now he is in her hands, and she can play with him as she wants. As long as she can engrave a trace of divine consciousness into the other party's soul, and replace his object of admiration with her, Lilith, with his piety and ability, wouldn't he become her exclusive believer? The souls of many brave knights of Britannia who died in battle will also be treated and collected by her in this way, and they will accompany her loyally in the following time. Thinking of this, Lilith's eyes looking at Rohan also became a little gentle. Although Rohan's rude words just now made her very dissatisfied, there is still a long way to go, and they have plenty of time to spend a sweet time. TSK, it's hard to imagine a Darachi who can open a portal to another world. What a magical existence. Thank you for your compliment. If you don't mind, I want to drink something to replenish my energy. At this time, Rohan's attitude also became a little slower, not because he had surrendered, but because he had to wait for the opportunity. As a living saint, why would he need to replenish his energy? Everything is just to delay time. After all, no matter what, Rajlia is also a god with 3 worlds faith. How could she be blocked by a mere seal? What's more, as long as the other 2 worlds are not unexpected, the huge and stable power of faith will continuously strengthen Rajlia's divine power. As long as Lilith's sealing technique does not reach the level of the 4 gods of chaos, the Mist Lady will always have a chance to escape the seal. At that time, Lilith didn't know what Rohan was thinking. She was so proud that she already regarded Rohan as something in her pocket. How could she care about his thoughts? Rohan naturally guessed what the other party was thinking. After all, if it was him, he would not want to let go of such a useful portal tool. The only question was, could he defend himself? Seeing Lilith standing leisurely at the entrance of the palace, Rohan hurriedly hid behind the stone pillar and kept asking the system in his heart, "System, if Lilith wants to curse me like Mark of the Great Horned Rat, can I stop it with my current energy?" Ding. The system always protects the host's soul. With the current magic power in the host, there is a high probability that it can be resisted, and a small probability of backlash. Then hurry up and give me the fueling potion now. Taking advantage of Lilith's relaxation, Rohan hurriedly took out a small bottle of fueling potion from the system space, ready to use it to resist Lilith's next erosion of himself. Fueling potion 3/3. It can make the user have good luck in the next 12 hours and effectively help the user control his emotions. After looking at the introduction on the system panel, Rohan looked at the small bottle with a little golden liquid in his hand, put it to his mouth, and took a sip. The cold liquid slowly slid into Rohan's throat, and a clear cold current rushed straight into his brain, which was a little flustered due to anxiety, helping him to calm down. After a while, Rohan came back to his senses, and his slightly panicked eyes were replaced by a pool of dead water. Under the effect of the elixir, his brain was able to function fully, and every brain cell was helping him to come up with ideas, trying to think of a way to break the deadlock. First of all, the most important thing at the moment is to delay time and wait for Rajlia to successfully break the seal. Secondly, it is to use the advantage of the system to protect his soul, use himself as bait, and at the same time find an opportunity to counterattack and severely injure Lilith. After confirming his 2 goals, Rohan decisively walked out of the stone pillar and came to the center of Lilith's palace, looking at Lilith's back calmly. Lilith turned around calmly, holding a holy grail that came from nowhere in her hand, which was the one that Rohan had rejected. She had been using her spiritual sense to observe Rohan's every move, so she naturally noticed the elixir Rohan drank. Although she didn't know what Rohan drank, the confident Lilith didn't think that the small golden bottle could change the situation that was now sure to win. Moreover, although she didn't know why, when she turned her head to look at Rohan just now, she suddenly felt that his well-developed muscles and face became particularly attractive. Speaking of which, it seems that she hasn't had meat for a long time, right? Gulp. After quietly swallowing the non-existent saliva, Lilith came to Rohan with the Holy Grail and asked in a delicate voice, "How is your physical strength replenishment? If you still feel it's not enough, I have something good in this cup." Rohan took the Holy Grail with a smile on his face. There was a little whitish liquid in the cup. If nothing unexpected happened, it should be foot washing water. If nothing unexpected happened, if he drank the water in the Holy Grail at this time, he would probably become a believer of the other party from the bottom of his heart like those Holy Grail knights. Under Lilith's regretful gaze, Rohan did not drink the water in the Holy Grail. Instead, he knelt on one knee in front of Lilith and prayed sincerely, "Moon Goddess, I know you will not easily forgive my behavior, but I wonder if you can let me see Lady Mist for the last time. PS. I know the pace is a bit slow. I will see if I can add an update tomorrow to speed up the Lilith chapter." Chapter 113 Savior Lilith. Lilith, who already had the victory in her grasp, actually didn't want to agree to Rohan's request. After all, even she knew that she shouldn't be so wasteful in a favorable situation. What's more, her original intention was to delete Rajlia's consciousness and then keep her body for her own use. Why bother? However, the effect of the Blessed Spirit finally began to show. When good luck came, it couldn't be stopped, even if she wanted to. Lilith looked at the Durachi who was extremely devout to Rajlia in front of her, and suddenly a hint of jealousy flashed in her heart. Anyway, as long as he drank the water in the Holy Grail, the piety of this handsome boy would belong to her, Lilith. So why not bring Rajlia here, to see it with her own eyes? What's more, her thighs and buttocks were whipped so many times before, and this revenge must be avenged. When she thought that she was about to take away the other party's most valued believer in front of Rajlia, and the other party could only watch all this happen helplessly in the seal, she was unexpectedly excited. Yes, the merciful Moon Goddess will agree to your request and even release Lady Mist, but after that, you must change your beliefs and swear allegiance to me. I'll consider it respectful. Shit, Goddess. Rohan seemed to agree to Lilith's request on the surface. The elixir made his mind exceptionally calm, so that his acting skills were raised to a higher level. Since he had already decided to use his soul as bait, the last thing Rohan had to do at this time was to make sure that Lady Mist was really safe. Come on, lady, now it depends on whether you can break the seal. Looking at the sincerity on Rohan's face, Lilith smiled slightly, grabbed the air with her hand, and a silver white light burst out in the void instantly. Stimulated by the strong light, Rohan subconsciously closed his eyes, and only opened his eyes after the strong light dissipated. He looked at the light screen in front of him and subconsciously said, "Madam, are you okay?" Opposite the light screen was Rajlia, who was now imprisoned in a cage composed of silver threads, constantly using divine power to impact the nearby silver threads. At this time, Rajlia was filled with anger. She had never known that she had Lilith's consciousness in her body, let alone that she had been manipulated by the other party. However, as Lilith extracted the consciousness lurking in her body, all her lost memories came back. As a goddess who has existed for thousands of years, how could her sphere of influence be limited to the Iris region, and only have one reliable believer, Isharian? All thanks to Lilith. Whenever Rajlia was about to bless those believers with outstanding performance, Lilith would intervene, control Rajlia, and coax those believers to drink foot-washing water. In this way, the excellent believers who originally belonged to her belief in the Lady of the Mist were taken away by Lilith. If Rajlia used to be disgusted with Lilith's hypocrisy, now she can't wait to tear Lilith apart. Inside the seal, Rajlia's majestic divine power was constantly impacting the surrounding cages. Her former elegant manners were gone, replaced by a raging rage like that of a female demon. Her long silver white hair was flying in the air, and her noble golden eyes were emitting a terrifying light. Even the surrounding space seemed to be torn apart by the divine power that was almost condensed into a solid entity. Under Rajlia's violent attack, the silver seal was constantly expanded, but it could not be broken. This was a seal carefully prepared by Lilith. Unless Rajlia could possess a power that exceeded that of Lilith, it would be impossible to break through. At this moment, Rajlia noticed the light screen floating in the air, on which was the smiling Lilith and Rohan holding the Holy Grail. Seeing that Rohan also fell into Lilith's hands, Rajlia's eyebrows were raised, and she gritted her teeth and cursed, "Lilith, don't eat your sour carrot." How dare you do this to me? Why shouldn't I dare? Dear Sister Misty, you once said that you wanted to fight against the erosion of chaos, and so did I, but in a different way. Looking at the sealed Draglia, Lilith couldn't help but mock her, and then came to Rohan in front of her, touched Rohan's chin and said, "Your strength can grow so fast, isn't it because of this handsome boy, who brought you the faith of the other world? Resist chaos? What you are doing now is just to enhance your own strength, and satisfy your ambitions." Draglia was so angry that she laughed. The elf gods almost knew what each other was like, and the god king Rohan took the lead in playing badly, resulting in the pantheon having no intention of fighting against chaos. Although there are still many gods trying to save this world that will eventually be destroyed, Draglia can be sure that Lilith is definitely not one of them. There is no doubt that Lilith did give the High Elves of Ulthar many magical items, but most of these items were used to fight the civil war between the followers of Cain and Ajuran. If Lilith really wanted to resist chaos, why did she do such an act? To weaken the followers of the main gods? Lilith did not refute Draglia's accusation, but came behind Rohan, pinching the handsome boy's face with her fingers and introducing, "You know, Sister Misty, I have always believed that this world is like nature. It is cyclical. Every era is a reincarnation, and we are just at the end of the era. The world will be destroyed one day, and those who survive will become the creator gods of the new world and build a new pantheon, just like my father." Hearing this, Draglia stopped bombarding the seal with divine power, and prepared to listen to what Lilith's conspiracy was. Rohan let Lilith's hands move on him. His first task was to delay time, not to mention that he also wanted to know what Lilith's goal was. Whether it was to mock Draglia or to tell Rohan, who was about to become her believer, about her great plan. Lilith let go of Rohan and said righteously, "The end is inevitable, but the new future is about to be realized. As long as I can start a new reincarnation, I can become the new god of creation and fight against chaos. How about it, handsome boy? Do you want to join my team? With your help, the new world will become even better." Lilith hugged Rohan again, and teasingly put her fingers into the holy grail in his hand, stirring up a wave of pale white liquid. Rohan looked at the holy grail in his hand expressionlessly. In Draglia's worried eyes, he slowly raised the holy grail and asked, "So, Lilith, what is the price?" Chapter 114, Surpassing the Greed of the Four Gods. The price. Lilith was slightly stunned. If she wanted to become the god of creation, she had to push away everything in front of her, leaving only the reincarnation of her own world. And those elves and humans who were responsible for fighting against chaos could ensure that they would fight to the last man and buy time for his small world. Thinking of this, Lilith looked at Rohan's eyes firmly and replied, "The price is all this. You are really generous to others." Hearing this, even Rohan, who had the blessing spirit to stabilize his emotions, couldn't help but feel irritated and didn't believe her nonsense at all. It's okay for you to think about becoming the god of creation, but you also want to drag those who really want to fight hard for survival into the water. You are too shameless, aren't you? You are amazing. You are so noble. When the new world reincarnates, you will become the master of the pantheon. Will you revive those who died? In Lilith's expectant eyes, Rohan slowly raised the holy grail, and then poured it over. The translucent liquid spilled directly onto the ground, and then Rohan casually threw away the holy grail, and mocked Lilith, who was gradually getting angry behind him, expressionlessly. "You are just a green tea who constantly harms others for your own selfishness. Whether in the past, present, or even in the distant future, will people like you change? Good scolding. How dare you refuse this gift?" Draglia's cheers and Lilith's exasperated voice came at the same time, making Rohan's mouth curl up with a smile. Lilith looked at Rohan, who repeatedly rejected her kindness, and the smile on her face finally couldn't be maintained. She snapped her fingers in anger. Snap. The mithril chain that had fallen in the distance flew straight towards Rohan. Rohan did not resist, and let Lilith tie up his limbs again. He knew that in front of a god, he was still too weak now, and there was no need to resist except for the system that could backfire. Lilith didn't want to waste any more time. She wanted to see Draglia's joke, but Rohan refused to obey. She touched Rohan's head with one hand, and a faint white light came out of her hands, ready to forcibly control the other's soul. "Since you don't want to drink, I will force it to merge into your soul." Just as Lilith's consciousness was about to merge a small part of herself into Rohan's body, she suddenly noticed that there seemed to be a hint of green on the soul's chest. At the same time, a faint smell of disgust also shifted her attention to the green, and she couldn't help but be surprised. Huh? Why are there traces of dirty rats? Didn't the mist lady you've been thinking about help you get rid of it? Don't stir up trouble over there. I chose to stay here myself, Rohan explained with his eyes closed. At this time, he was patiently looking for an opportunity to retaliate against Lilith, while verbally lowering Lilith's guard, before controlling me. Don't you want to know why the Mist Lady came to this world? Oh, isn't it because of the portal you opened? Hearing this topic, Lilith really became interested. She temporarily put down her hand that was checking Rohan's body and held Rohan's face curiously. After all, the reason why she wanted to control Rohan was because she saw his ability to open the portal, which would be of great help to her plan to become the god of creation. Looking at Lilith's palm close to his mouth, Rohan opened his mouth and tried to bite off the other's finger, but Lilith easily straightened his face. What a pity. Maybe eating Lilith's divine flesh would be good for you. Seeing that he couldn't bite off Lilith's finger, Rohan could only give up helplessly, looking at Lilith's beautiful face and said, the power of the gods will continue to increase with the number of believers, and I can travel through countless unknown worlds to bring faith to the Lady of the Mist. So the relationship between you and the Lady of the Mist is just a transaction. You believe in her, will she bless you? Of course not. I sincerely believe in and respect the Lady of the Mist. After all, whenever I'm in danger, she always appears in time. The calm Rohan did not hide his admiration for the Lady of the Mist. After all, as a poor man with no one to rely on in the Warhammer world, the Lady of the Mist was one of his few thighs. Lilith was obviously not interested in the relationship between the two. She was more concerned about the faith mentioned by Rohan, so she asked, in that case, why do you collect faith for Lady Mist? If you just hope that someone will come to save you when you are in danger, I can do it too. Do you have the responsibility? After looking at Lilith with a slightly disdainful look, Rohan looked at Rajlia in the light screen not far away and said with a smile, the first time I came into contact with Lady Mist was because I heard that she would frequently treat her believers kindly, and I simply wanted to cling to her thighs. But after a few years of getting along, I found that Lady Mist has an incomparable noble quality, which is a dignity that you can never match. On the light screen, Rajlia looked at Rohan with a soft look in her eyes, and the other party's heartfelt praise made her feel warm. Well, this kid is not loved in vain. Hearing Rohan constantly praising Rajlia, Lilith's face showed a trace of dissatisfaction. None of her believers had praised her so affectionately. Seeing that Rohan was staring at the light screen and seemed to be going to continue praising, Lilith directly blocked his sight with her face and then asked, let's get to the point. Why do you want to help Ms. Mist? Isn't it to enhance her strength? How can you understand our great ideal of saving the common people when you only want to become the god of creation for yourself? With the idea of delaying time, Rohan simply told Lilith about his plan to believe in and create gods. Just like you said, chaos is accumulating strength to destroy the world. So you want to find a new world to hide in, and then abandon all the people in the old world, and become the creator god of the new world yourself. But we are different. For those believers and people who love us, we must create a glimmer of hope for them, and that is to create gods. Create gods? Do you want to use the faith of another world to fight against the 4 chaos gods? It's ridiculous. After hearing Rohan's plan, Lilith's first reaction was absurdity. The believers of the 4 chaos gods were more than hundreds of billions. How could you possibly compare? However, on second thought, with Rohan, who can freely travel through other worlds and spread faith in other worlds, it seems that it is not impossible to attract hundreds of millions of believers! Exclamation mark. Thinking of this, Lilith's eyes changed instantly when she looked at Rohan. Yes, since Rajlia can rely on the ability of this handsome boy to become stronger, then I can do it too. And to be safe, she can also sacrifice the entire old world, use the power of the old world to weaken chaos, and then rely on Rohan's way of spreading faith to become stronger. As long as it takes thousands or tens of thousands of years, she, Lilith, can also become comparable to the 4 gods of chaos. No, even surpass them. looking at Lilith in front of him who wanted to eat him alive. Rohan quietly gave Rajlia in the light screen next to him a look, and then closed his eyes, as if letting Lilith slaughter him. Next it was their turn to perform. Chapter 115, Fight for the Soul. Lilith didn't let Rohan wait too long. After learning about their plan, she immediately thought of forcibly controlling the other's soul. Just as Rohan said, this method of gathering hundreds of billions of beliefs in the other world to a single god can evenly divide the chaos, even if it can't defeat it. And if Lilith can obtain this power, let alone become the creator god of the new world, she can even break the cycle of reincarnation and become the eternal queen of the elf god. Putting her hand on Rohan's head again, Lilith looked at Rohan with a ruddy face and said, "Don't worry, Kit. From today on, you are an exclusive believer of Lilith, and I will take good care of you." "Really? I hope you don't let me find an opportunity, otherwise I will use all the methods of the Joy Cult on you." Rohan closed his eyes, and his consciousness slowly sank into the system space. Looking at the light screens floating in front of him, he asked the system, "Now that I have drunk the fueling potion, is the probability of resisting Lilith increased?" Ding. According to the host's current energy storage, it will be able to completely resist soul erosion, and at the same time, it is highly likely to be an eroder. The cold voice of the system calmed Rohan's originally uneasy heart, and patiently prepared to welcome Lilith's invasion of his soul. Now he is no longer the weak admiral who trembled under the big horned rat mark. Lilith didn't know that Rohan had already prepared a trap for herself. At this time, she was slowly probing her consciousness into Rohan's body. In her opinion, since Rohan was about to become her believer, as the other party's main god, she should express her opinion. Touching Rohan's smooth hair, Lilith began to sow discord in order to get closer to him. "Sister Misty is really stingy. The mark on your chest was left by the great horned rat, right? You are unwilling to help you repair it. It's too much. I've already said that I left it voluntarily. There is no need for you to sow discord. This kind of thing is left on the body, but it is harmful and useless. I will help you remove it." "What the hell?" Exclamation mark. Before Rohan could react, Lilith's consciousness had already rushed to the scar on Rohan's soul chest and began to erase the mark of the great horned rat. Warning. An unknown force is repairing the host soul. The characteristic, great horned rat mark, is about to be erased. Do you need to stop it? Hiss. Rohan, who was floating in the system space, took a breath of cold air, but because he was a spiritual body, he didn't absorb anything. Lilith was so kind as to help him erase the mark of the great horned rat? Exclamation mark. The main reason why Rohan kept the mark of the great horned rat was because he had once turned a disaster into a blessing, and with the help of the mark, he unlocked the ability of dream recall. In addition, apart from making himself a poor man, this mark did not cause him any trouble, so he kept it. After thinking for a long time, Rohan sighed. Although this thing was a blessing in disguise for him, it was still a curse after all, so he should get rid of it. Don't stop this for now. If Lilith wants to leave any tricks, my soul should react strongly. Ding. I have given up stopping her. The system will always pay attention to the soul safety of the host. Based on the principle of freeloading, Rohan let Lilith delete the mark of the great horned rat. His calm brain, which had taken the blessing spirit potion, did not even feel a trace of guilt. He knew that the reason why Lilith helped him expel the mark was nothing more than to sow discord and make him more obedient to the other party. Rohan only felt a gentle force constantly gathering towards the scar on his chest. As long as it was eliminated, Rohan's body would be perfect. After an unknown amount of time, as a needle-like pain came from his chest, the system's prompt sound came into his ears. Ding. The characteristic, big horned rat mark, has been erased. Is it over? It's Lilith's turn next. Rohan opened his eyes. If he were Lilith, the next step at this time should be, warning. The host is detected to be suffering from a soul level curse, and a substitute is being searched for in space. A substitute has been searched. Storm Dragon Egg right square bracket asterisk 1. Do you want to use it as a replacement? Don't touch my egg. Use my magic power. Rohan frowned slightly. It was the first time he knew that a dragon egg could have such a function, but he would never use a dragon egg in such a place. This is a treasure that can be used as his mount in the future. How can it be wasted so casually? Warning. No other substitutes have been found. The host's magic power will be extracted. Please keep the host's magic power output. After being rejected by Rohan, the system began to forcibly extract the magic power in Rohan's body. Unlike last time, Rohan's magic power was abundant this time. Feeling the magic power in his body being continuously extracted, Rohan silently felt the speed of the extraction, and then secretly breathed a sigh of relief. The pain of the last time the magic power was extracted was too impressive for him. He didn't want to experience the pain of his cells being drained at a very fast speed again. Fortunately, if it is at this speed, I should be able to hold on for a while. Rohan in the system space breathed a sigh of relief, but Lilith, who was outside, frowned and became confused. No, what's wrong with this inexplicable feeling of blockage? It was not there when I deleted the imprint just now. She has done this kind of thing for more than 10,000 times. Countless Holy Grail Knights of Britannia and excellent warriors among the elves have used this method to change their beliefs. Why did an accident happen today? At this time, Lilith still didn't know that she had been given Rohan's divine power for free, and she was still full of doubts as she continued to inject her divine power into Rohan's body. The system was like a magic amplifier, constantly absorbing the magic power from Rohan's body, and then using it to block Lilith. With the support of abundant magic power, the system was even able to fight against the invading Lilith's divine power, and even had a crushing trend. Even Lilith could feel that her divine power was being slowly forced out by a force, and a touch of shock appeared on her beautiful face. Since Rohan's spirit had entered the system space, his comatose body could only be at the mercy of Lilith. How is it possible? He is obviously just a mortal. Why is the strength of his soul so amazing? Looking at this white and attractive body, Lilith's face was full of confusion, and she couldn't help but start to touch this magical body. On the light screen not far away, Rajlia was collecting the power of faith from the panned world, preparing to wait for an opportunity to break free from the seal. Humph, Lilith, you little swordsman, wait until I get out of this and see how I'll deal with you. Thinking of this, Rajlia couldn't help but glance at the light screen, and then stood up and yelled like an angry cat, Lilith, where the hell are you touching? PS. Try to finish this section with 1 or 2 pictures. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116, Lilith's Bite Mark. Hearing Rajlia's scolding, Lilith pulled out her palm and gestured to the other party with a victorious attitude. I have to say, this strong body is really amazing. Haven't you tried to enjoy it? Not everyone is as shameless as you. Let him go. Facing Rajlia's accusation, Lilith directly stripped Rohan naked and faced the loser Rajlia. Seeing this live broadcast, Rajlia simply closed her eyes and planned to turn a blind eye, but the scene just now kept echoing in her mind. No, such behavior is too painful for Rohan, who is in a coma. I must find a way to break out of the seal and save him. In order to get Rohan out of the sea of suffering as soon as possible, Rajlia began to frantically absorb the faith from the other world, and the whole person wanted to become stronger than ever before. The Mist Lady in the seal is accumulating the power of faith, and Rohan in the system space is not idle either, and is constantly fighting with Lilith for the soul. Since he was in the system space, he could not sense the flow of time outside, nor did he know what was happening in the outside world. But he always felt something was wrong. Strange, why is the speed of extracting magic power faster than before? System, when will the backlash you mentioned be ready? Ding. The divine power that invaded the host's soul is being gathered. As long as the host agrees, this divine power will immediately backfire on the invader. In order to facilitate Rohan's understanding, the system also attached a light screen, which recorded Rohan's existing magic power and the value of the invading divine power. Looking at the magic power that was constantly recovering and disappearing, and the divine power of Lilith accumulating more and more in the depths of his soul, Rohan hesitated for a moment. After a while, his eyes were full of determination, and he encouraged secretly, come on, hold on for a while, and the backlash later must give Lilith a big surprise. Rohan didn't know that he was not the only one who was holding on at this time. Pand Continent, Dillingang in the castle hall, several villagers from nearby villages were full of panic on their faces, waiting outside the gate in fear. It was not difficult to tell from the dust and torn clothes on them that they had gone through a lot of hardships to get here. After a long while, a Durachi warrior finally opened the door, looked at this group of dirty short-lived creatures with disdain, and said in a harsh voice, "Dirty ghosts, the governor has approved your request for an audience. When you go in, be respectful and don't look around." "Yes, yes, sir, we promise not to look around." The leading villagers nodded in fear, and then walked into the hall of the castle under the leadership of the Durachi warrior. Wow. Although they were warned by the Durachi warrior, the gorgeous decorations all over the hall and the Teutonic knights standing guard around still made them look around subconsciously. That's right, out of Rohan's own bad taste, he named the armed monastery composed of penned knights under his command the Teutonic Knights. There were 2 chairs and a standing person in front of the seats in the hall. The seated people were Governor Dario, Deputy Captain of the Teutonic Knights, Aaron, and the captive Ragnar. Aaron was a local noble in Imperial Harbor. As the first human noble to pledge allegiance to Rohan, he was promoted by Rohan. The captive Ragnar was used by Rohan to threaten Dario with the surviving Shadow Centurions to learn about the culture and knowledge of Copperpond. Looking at these trembling villagers, Dario put the report in his hand aside and patiently asked the villagers, "You said there was an urgent military situation to report. What happened?" "My lord, you must make the decision for us." A villager took off his hat and saluted. This was one of the few etiquettes he knew as a farmer. Then he cried and complained, "Those terrible snake cult believers are constantly gathering. They burned farmland, raped women, and even took away our babies. Night Alien, I have never heard your patrol knights report these things. Why did this happen?" Hearing the villagers' complaints, Dario looked at Alien with some dissatisfaction, and Alien shook his head blankly. "I'm sorry, Governor. The recent patrol night report pointed out that the number of snake cult believers in the folk is decreasing significantly, but we can't trace their movements at all." "Do you mean that the snake cult is gathering into an organized army, just like the army in Boshi City?" Dario frowned. Since Rohan took away the first batch of soldiers who had completed training, there were less than 10,000 new recruits in his human vassal army. He looked at the hundreds of thousands of snake worshippers in Boshi City. Even if the situation was good, he would have to face tens of thousands of troops alone. The task is arduous. Looking at these poor villagers, Dario's eyes did not have a trace of pity. He was not a human, let alone a native of Penda, so he would not worry about their fate. The most important thing now was how he should guard against the snake worshippers who might appear at any time. Looking at Ragnar, whose hands and feet were shackled, Dario glanced at the battle report in his hand, and couldn't help asking, "Ragnar, right? You have fought against the snake cult more times than us. Tell me about the composition of their army. How this is your revenge for destroying the Shadow Legion." As a prisoner, Ragnar complained in a low voice at first, but the snake cult was also his enemy, so he seriously advised, "You'd better abandon the city and flee." This time the snake cult has assembled 2 armies, which means that the evil goddess intends to destroy the Bacchus Empire and the elves at the same time. If nothing unexpected happens, there should be VIP warriors blessed by the evil goddess. They are powerful warriors with power several times that of the Cobra warriors. I think even you elves will find it difficult to resist. Hearing Ragnar's sincere advice, Dario fell into thinking. If what the other party said was true, then his chances of winning this time were indeed slim. Not to mention, whether the combat effectiveness of the thousands of new recruits was reliable. It was a serious question, whether those captains of the Druki regiments who had ulterior motives were willing to obey his command. Needless to say, these captains who were jealous of him becoming the governor would definitely not do their best in the battle. They probably hoped that he would make mistakes, so that they could replace him. What's more, he did not intend to ask Lord Rohan for help. After all, he had just become the governor's throne. If he asked for help without authorization, before he even had time to sit on the throne, he would definitely be regarded as a foolish and incompetent person. No matter how many casualties he suffered this time, he had to prove to those captains who coveted his position that he became the governor through persistent and hard work. Drachi is not afraid of any battle. noticed to recall all the soldiers and knights outside, and the blacksmiths and workshops, to make city defense weapons with all their strength. Let's have a defensive battle. Dario stood up passionately. He wanted to prove to Lord Rohan through this battle that he was fully qualified for this position. However, Dario didn't know at this time that the unfortunate Rohan was trapped in Lilith's moon palace and was suffering inhuman torture. Slurp bursts of water sounds came into Rajlia's ears, making her veins pop out on her head. She wanted to slap Lilith twice. This swordsman dared to do that in front of her. The constantly gathering power of faith made her strength increase rapidly. It was estimated that she would be able to break the seal in no time. Rohan, you must hold on. You must not surrender to Lilith easily. Rajlia quickly closed her eyes, waiting for the opportunity to break the seal. P.S. It's too lustful. Can it pass the review? Chapter 117 Lost Time. Albion Continent, Lion Lake City. If the Pend Continent without the support of Rohan's portal can still barely hold on under Dario's command, then Anj, who has lost his backbone, has fallen into complete madness. Since Rohan was brought to this space by Lilith, the flow speed of the two worlds is not the same. Rohan may only feel that time has passed for only one night, but the outside world has already passed a month. Including the Pen soldiers and Durachi warriors who followed Rohan, they all fell into extreme anxiety because of Rohan's disappearance. Among them, the guards who fell into extreme guilt and regret were the most. Where is Lord Rohan? Where is my master? In the palace hall, the guards led by Anj and the Silver Mist Hunter were holding silver crossbows and confronting their former comrades. Now the castle garrisoned the Silver Mist guards, and Anj looked at Isabel sitting on the throne angrily. Although the other's face was full of haggardness, he doubted it. As cold-blooded Durachi, they could not understand Rohan's love for Isabel, but they were usually very humble in their attitude towards each other. After all, she might be the future mistress, so no matter how arrogant they were, they would be more or less restrained when facing Isabel. Moreover, as a sorceress, although Isabel had not seen the true strength of the other party, she still won the minimum respect of the Durachi. But now, after sleeping with the other party for a night, their lord mysteriously disappeared inexplicably. Isn't this nonsense? Exclamation mark. Many longbow guards have arrived at the scene, and hundreds of longbows have been aimed at these personal soldiers, but the Silver Mist Hunters are not afraid. They are warriors blessed by the Lady of the Mist, and they are gods to these weak human warriors. How can a mere mortal kill a god? The only thing that makes them afraid is probably the former colleagues who were placed in front of them. The two teams of Silver Mist guards arranged by Rohan to protect Isabel. Looking at these warriors of the same race holding the morning mist halberds and wearing silver plate armor, Anj narrowed his eyes and scolded. What? Have you forgotten who you are loyal to? Calm down, man. The task given to us by Lord Rohan is to protect Queen Isabel at all costs. This is a death order. Even if Lord Rohan appears in person, we must verify our identities. The captain of the guard also had a hard time. In order to guard against someone impersonating him, Rohan gave them a death order to protect Isabel at all costs. Although they were very reluctant to carry out the boring life of standing guard, Rohan increased their salary by 3 times. This is another price. After all, they were just fierce spearmen, and it was good to have a monthly salary of 1 gold coin. After being promoted to Silver Mist Guards, their salaries were raised to 5 gold coins, and now they are even receiving a high salary of 15 gold coins, which makes them very moved. Therefore, unless Rohan, who can prove his identity, personally asks them to evacuate, they will not give up an inch. Looking at the ungrateful captain of the guard, Anj slowly placed his hand on the hilt of the sword, and the captain of the guard also carefully raised his halberd, ready to fulfill his duty to the death. The warriors on both sides were also on the verge of a fight, and it seemed that a big battle would break out at any time. Looking at the fast below, Isabel's originally haggard face was gradually filled with anger. Rohan's guards actually suspected her. Although she and Rohan had experienced many conflicts, and she had even guessed a little about her father's death, her love for Rohan was completely from the heart. For the sake of her lover, she had even suppressed the hatred of her own murder, just so that the two of them could get married as soon as possible and live a peaceful life. And now, someone actually thought that she would kill her beloved fiancé, the future king of this country. Exclamation mark. Thinking of this, Isabel stood up suddenly, gradually exuding the dignity of a superior, and shouted to Ange solemnly, "Enough. I don't have the time to mess with you, Captain Ange. I have no doubt about your loyalty to law, but the most important thing now is to find law's whereabouts. Then I want to ask you, who may know the whereabouts of the adults? Or who is most likely to hurt the adults?" Hearing Isabel's shout, Ange slowly put down his hand holding the hilt and asked unwillingly, and Isabel had already chosen the most likely target she knew, and a vine on the wall rolled up an envelope and handed it to Ange. "I don't know if these things are related to Law's disappearance, but I think we should focus on him now." Aang looked at Isabel on the throne, took the envelope and opened it. After carefully reading the contents, he frowned and read, "King Kirantis was killed, and the new King Roderick was able to use black magic. At the same time, he planted a magic bean and prepared to command the giant army." After reading the envelope, Aang looked at Isabel on the stage. He first waved his hand to let the soldiers behind him lay down their weapons, and then asked, "You mean, this guy named Roderick used a kind of black magic to take Lord Rohan away?" "I don't know either. The traitor named Roderick pried open the tomb of my ancestors and stole the crown that could control the giants. He must have ulterior ambitions." Isabel stepped down from the throne, pushed away the silver mist guards who were blocking her way, and her slightly haggard face was full of determination. She asked Aang, "You don't like me because I'm a human being. I can understand that, but now I hope we can complete the orders that Law left behind, unifying this continent, capturing Roderick, and controlling those giants were the orders that Law left behind at the time. I promise you that the kingdom of Christ, and even the throne of the entire Albion continent, will belong to Rohan." Looking at the sincerity on Isabel's face, Aang fell into silence. Having lost his backbone, he was very confused about the future. Should he search the entire continent aimlessly, or faithfully implement the plan left by Rohan? This is a question. After hesitating for a moment, Aang came back to his senses, and looked at Isabel in front of him and said proudly, "Don't think that you are qualified to be our mistress, just because you have slept with Lord Rohan. The troops will be under your command during the absence of Lord Rohan, but you must ensure that you can unify this continent as soon as possible." Then he shook his long braid and took these soldiers to reorganize the army. Although Lord Rohan is gone, the plan to unify the continent still needs to be implemented. If the Lord comes back and sees that the plan has been completed, he should be very satisfied, right? Chapter 118, Sudden Attack. Compared to the rapidly flowing timeline outside, Rohan in the void seemed much calmer. Although he didn't know why, he could feel a sense of overdraft in his body, but the current sufficient magic power gave him a great boost of confidence. Looking at the ever-increasing divine power value on the light screen, Rohan's mouth curled up slightly, and he couldn't wait to give Lilith a surprise. "I have accumulated enough divine power for Lilith. When Lilith's divine consciousness enters my body, I will use this power to bombard her divine consciousness." In the system space, Rohan was patiently waiting for Lilith to enter. Outside the system space, Lilith had already finished. In the palace, Lilith was drinking from the holy cup filled with spring water, and a white mist came out of her mouth from time to time, which looked very much like a cigarette after the event. After a short rest, Lilith flew to the light screen, and looked at Rajlia who was sitting on the ground absorbing the power of faith. She deliberately showed off, "Look at you now. This is the end of having no strength. You can only watch your believers being played by me." Rajlia closed her eyes. She wanted to become stronger than ever before. After all, Lilith was just playing around, and she didn't rush to do it in order to mock her. If Rohan unfortunately fell into the hands of Slaanesh in the war with chaos in the future, she couldn't even think about it. Looking at Rajlia who had no reaction, Lilith didn't want to play anymore. When Rohan fell into her hands, she could play however she wanted. Thinking of this, Lilith's heart was filled with joy, and she put her hand on Rohan again. Before, she was just playing around, injecting divine power into Rohan's body in advance to facilitate the transformation of souls. After the transformation was over, she would seriously have a carnival in front of Rajlia, and then absorb it in Rajlia's grief and anger. The best food should always be saved for last, right? Humming a little tune, the happy Lilith slowly probed her consciousness into Rohan's somewhat weak body, preparing to start the final soul transformation. The soul that had been repaired by Lilith's own hands was as tempting as Rohan's flawless body, making Lilith want to immediately dye her own color on this white paper. Rohan, who had been lurking for a long time, also received the warning from Lilith that his soul was being modified. Ding. The host's soul is being modified, and the system is blocking it. Do you want to counter it? Because Rohan's magic power was absorbed in advance, the system was able to mobilize all the energy, including the magic power, that Lilith had previously accumulated. Lilith's consciousness had no idea that there was a terrifying trap waiting for her in the depths of Rohan's soul, and she still began to modify Rohan's soul without any precautions. It was called soul modification, but in fact it was just replacing Rohan's memories of Rajlia with Lilith herself. When Rohan's consciousness awakens, the object of his love and admiration will completely become a god. Looking at Rohan's milky soul, Lilith couldn't help licking her lips and sighed. Such a pure soul. Maybe after this is over, we should spend 100 years together to get along well. Since the ancient saints left, the chaos demons began to invade in large numbers, and all creatures with souls were inevitably corrupted. Whether it was the elves living in Althon, the dwarves in the mountains, or even the humans far away in the old road, their souls were polluted. Even though the chaos wave has temporarily subsided, the souls of those newly born children have also been slightly polluted by chaos. As a soul from another world, Rohan's pure soul is simply the best template for Lilith, who is preparing to create a new world. Such a pure soul is really rare. How about cutting off some of it to make the prototype of the elves and the new world? A ghost idea suddenly appeared in Lilith's mind, and the blessing spirit began to work, making Lilith ready to fall into the trap. If he did not choose to harm Rohan's soul, but really just modified Rohan's memory, then the system's counterattack would not be too fierce. But cutting Rohan's soul means that she must direct her divine power to Rohan's soul. This is enough for the system to follow Lilith's divine power and inject the long accumulated energy into Lilith's body. It should be okay to take only a few fragments, right? Lilith looked at Rohan's pure soul, and a voice in her heart kept driving her to take action. As the future elf creator god, Lilith originally wanted to select excellent elf warriors from the elves as the template for the new world, but Rohan's soul made her change her mind. So pure. In a trance, Lilith's divine power grabbed a corner of Rohan's soul, as if ready to tear it off. Rohan also received a warning from the system as Lilith moved. Warning. The host's soul is being damaged. Do you want to start countermeasures immediately? Finally, start now. In the system space, Rohan was constantly polishing a sharp, short, exquisite sword. This was the prize won by the card drawer in the past, the sword of the Eternal Emperor Joffrey, Lion's Tooth. Since there were really no decent weapons stored in the system space, Rohan could only use such flashy weapons. Although it was a common item, it was already the best weapon in the system space. If he wanted to fight to the death, this was the only way. After receiving Rohan's order, the divine power of Lilith that had been squeezed in Rohan's body began to slowly rush towards Lilith along with Lilith's roots. At first, Lilith didn't care, thinking that it was just her lost divine power. However, as more and more divine power began to backfire on her body, she gradually realized that something was wrong. Looking at the light spots flying towards her along the roots, Lilith extended her roots in surprise and observed curiously, what happened? Why are there so many divine powers gathered here? As the goddess of illusion, Lilith is very skilled in controlling dreams and memories, and this situation will never happen. However, it was precisely because of her confidence in her skills that Lilith just looked at the divine power rushing towards her consciousness curiously and did not do much defense. She was also ready to study what was different, but the system responsible for counterattacks did not want her to have a chance to react. The light spot suddenly accelerated, like a golden meteor, fiercely hitting Lilith's consciousness. Boom. What? The violent explosion directly shocked Lilith's consciousness, but before she could react from the aftermath, several more light spots flew towards her along the roots. Seeing this situation, Lilith decisively disconnected the roots, thinking that this would avoid the tracking light spots. However, the light spots flew straight towards Lilith's consciousness, which had just breathed a sigh of relief, like tracking missiles. What are these? Lilith avoided these light spots in shame and anger, but these light spots entangled her consciousness tightly, and she had no choice but to choose to leave Rohan's soul. Outside, Lilith suddenly let go of the hand that was touching Rohan's head, exhaled deeply, and her eyes were still full of surprise. Looking at the unconscious Rohan, Lilith smiled slightly. It seemed that these light spots could not do anything to her. Thinking of this, Lilith could not help but put her head close to Rohan's face and licked her lips when she saw him shrug. "You dare to scare me like this? It seems that you have to charge some interest." However, the next second, Rohan suddenly opened his eyes, and a dazzling golden beam suddenly flew out of his eyes and flew towards Lilith, who was close to his face. Lilith, Chapter 119, Seduction and True Love. Since Rohan's consciousness had not returned before, in order to make things easier, Lilith untied the mithril handcuffs and put Rohan down. Now, Lilith's face was facing Rohan, so he took advantage of the other party's daze and rushed up to hug Lilith's head. The beam of light bursting out of his eyes was aimed at Lilith's eyes, burning her eyes hotly. Lilith felt that her eyes were constantly burned by the sudden beam of light. Because it used Lilith's divine power, the beam of light could easily destroy Lilith's divine body. Let go. Don't even think about it. Lilith kept pushing Rohan, but how could Rohan, who had regained his freedom, let her do what she wanted? He didn't understand why he was naked, and he didn't know why his body was as weak as dehydration in just a few hours, but he knew that he couldn't let Lilith run away. Rohan flew to Lilith like a face hugger, put his face tightly in front of Lilith's eyes, and continued to burn her eyes. "Look at me. Look at me." Oh no, as her eyelids were burned by the beam of light shot by Rohan, Lilith wailed and fell to the ground, struggling. Soon she lost her sight. Her eyes were burned by Rohan. Rohan was overjoyed to see this, and was about to take advantage of the victory to pursue, but Lilith kicked Rohan away from her. After losing her sight, Lilith calmed down instead. She could feel that Rohan's strength was not great, but she was too frightened to break free. Moreover, the coolness on her body also made her realize that her clothes were scattered all over the ground, which made her particularly angry. She is the goddess of the moon, how could she have been humiliated like this? Rohan, who was kicked away, turned over in the air, then landed steadily on the ground, pulled out the lion's fang, and prepared to fight. Lilith was floating in the air. She no longer cared about clothes and modesty. She was full of doubts. She endured the pain in her eyes and shouted, "Wait a minute, I have a question. Ms. Misty, are you okay?" Rohan ignored Lilith and asked Rajlia, who was trying to break the seal again. Rajlia, who had accumulated power, started to attack the seal again. The silver threads began to break, but she still firmly controlled the seal. Hearing Rohan's question, Rajlia blushed and glanced at Rohan, whose body was covered with mosaics, and then comforted him. "This seal is still very strong, but I will be able to get out soon. You hold on first." "Damn it, shut up." Seeing that both of them ignored her, Lilith, who was temporarily blind, put on her clothes like a magic trick, and then couldn't help shouting angrily, pointing in the direction of Rohan, and asked, "You, this hateful little devil, why don't you want to be my believer? What nonsense are you talking about? You imprisoned the Lord God I love, and brought me here without authorization, and you actually want me to be your believer?" Rohan glanced at the other's huge chest quietly, and suddenly felt a phantom pain in his limbs, and then quickly retracted his sight and refuted righteously, "Damn, what's going on with this feeling of running out of ammunition and food?" Hearing this, Lilith instantly got angry. What's so good about Rajlia? Not only is she not as strong as Lilith, but she also wears a veil all day long. Who knows, there might be a face of Zhang Fengji underneath. Why do you love her so much? But you had a lot of resentment towards me when we first met. Why? As her eyesight recovered, Lilith slightly pulled down the ribbon on her shoulders in front of Rohan, revealing half of her breasts, and temptingly said, "Isn't I good looking? Humph, this has nothing to do with good looking or not, but the fact is that you deceived me when we first met." Rohan held the lion's tooth in both hands and looked at Lilith vigilantly. He knew that this weapon would most likely not break the opponent's divine body, but it could at least give him a little sense of security. Hearing Rohan's answer, Lilith thought for a moment, and then recalled the scene of her first encounter with the other party. It seemed that she had indeed deceived the other party. It will take some time for her eyesight to recover. Although Lilith can kill Rohan immediately, she now wants to capture him alive. Such ability and such a soul are too tempting for her, a goddess who also lives on faith. Since the hard way doesn't work, let's try something soft. Lilith slowly raised her hands, and Rohan picked up the lion's fang and began to pace. The damage he had inflicted on Lilith had been healed, and it seemed that it was time to fight to the death. Suddenly, Lilith took off the ribbon hanging on her body, revealing a mosaic, and walked to Rohan in a cat-like manner, tempting him. In this case, let me make it up to you. It's not impossible to do it inside. Cease forbid. Seeing that the topic was gradually failing to pass the review, Rohan directly interrupted the other party with righteous words. Seduction is something that you have the ability to do when I'm safe. Seeing that her charm could not move Rohan, Lilith's mouth twitched slightly. What on earth? Is Lilith not as good as Rajlia? Please, the mosaic in front of him now is the divine body that countless elves dream of but cannot obtain. And a bitch like Rajlia, who wears a veil all day, and whose body is shrouded in mist, might be like those VTBs that are loved by Otacus, who are beautiful girls on the surface, but pick their feet in the inside? Lilith didn't know that there is a saying that distance creates beauty, and she just likes negative distance. How can a goddess who dares not even show her face not be able to get me? Forget it, I'm tired of playing such insidious games. Lilith, who was furious, took action directly. After all, she could revive Rohan after killing him. Although it was a bit troublesome, she could still play it as she wanted. The moonlight scepter appeared in Lilith's hand again. Unlike before, the pale moonlight shone on the scepter this time. Rohan, who was originally ready to continue talking nonsense, was frightened and hurriedly raised the lion fang. The faint blue magic gathered on the sword, as if it could bring him some sense of security. It seems that this time it's over. He also knew that his continuous provocation had made Lilith full of resentment towards him, and estimated that this time she would probably kill him. Damn it, I didn't expect that. I didn't even have a pair of pants before I died. So where are my pants? As Lilith pressed on step by step, Rohan hurriedly retreated, but due to the limited space in the palace, he was soon blocked in a corner by the other party. Lilith raised her scepter and looked at Rohan shivering in the corner. She finally felt that she had saved some face and taunted, "Hey, don't worry, the pain is only temporary, and it will soon become very comfortable." Just when Rohan was about to be killed, Rajlia, who had spent a whole day gathering strength, finally broke through the cage, and then hurriedly opened a portal to the palace. Looking at the two spirits with mosaics flashing on their bodies in the palace and Lilith's blasphemous posture, Rajlia blushed and cursed. "Lilith, I'm Rhaena. Stop it." Chapter 120 Chapter 118 The Siege of Imperlingang. Ding. The characteristic, bad love like blood, is triggered, and Rajlia's all attributes are increased by plus 20%. Looking at Rajlia, who broke out of the seal, Rohan hadn't reacted to what was going on, and the system prompt sounded again in his ears. "Does this thing work on gods?" Exclamation mark. On the other side, Lilith obviously didn't realize the seriousness of the matter. She looked at Rajlia, who had escaped from the seal, and was surprised. "Hey, our river troll can actually break free. This is a seal she made according to her own strength 1:1. Even she herself didn't have much confidence that she could break free. Unexpectedly, Rajlia actually broke it. She didn't know that Rajlia, who had been desperately absorbing the power of faith for a whole day, was as strong as her with the blessing of bad love like blood. Looking at Rohan trembling in the corner, Rajlia angrily condensed a spear and aimed it at Lilith like a javelin. Locked in the seal, she watched Lilith lying on Rohan, doing everything she shouldn't do except the last step. It was fine if it was a live broadcast. After all, she was not completely ignorant of such things, so she could pretend not to see it. But the most important thing was that this swordsman dared to say that she was ugly in front of her. The reason why she usually wore a veil was mainly because she was shy. Lilith dared to say that she was a river troll in front of her believers. The lightning that kept jumping, like lightning attached to the spear, It was caused by Rajlia's sudden surge of divine power that was difficult to control, but it seemed very imposing. Feeling Rajlia's divine power that was faintly suppressing her, Lilith took back the scepter with some caution and changed her clothes with a wave of her hand. Looking at Lilith, whose mosaic disappeared, Rajlia couldn't help but sneer. Haha, you can put on clothes at any time, but you still want to be naked in front of my believers. You are really a sword. This is called interest. An old woman like you certainly doesn't know how to show her beauty. Lilith shook her long hair. Although Rajlia gave her a faint sense of oppression, she didn't think she would lose. Rajlia was full of vigilance. Although she didn't know why her strength increased greatly, she was vigilant and decided to let Rohan, the weakest one, leave first. However, to her surprise, before she could speak, Rohan took the initiative to come to her legs and offered to stay to help. My beloved Lady of the Mist, I'm honored to have the opportunity to fight with you. What a joke. If he just left like this, the buff of scum love like blood on Rajlia would disappear, and then everything would be over. But Rajlia obviously didn't know this. Seeing that the weak Rohan wanted to help her fight together, he was too loyal. Looking at Rohan drawing his sword and preparing for battle, she vaguely compared him with the Iris believers who did nothing but pray all day long. He is indeed my loyal and good general. Looking at Rohan beside Rajlia's thigh, Lilith secretly gritted her teeth. They were obviously already in a deep and simple relationship. Why did this little guy like to go against her so much? Although I don't know why you suddenly became stronger, this can't change the fact that you failed. You can try. Rohan, who was originally preparing to hug the white legs of the Mist Lady, saw that the two were really going to fight, and immediately hid beside the palace. Suddenly, Rohan noticed the white Pegasus lying in the corner to rest, so he hurriedly came to hide behind the Pegasus, while stroking the other's hair. He sighed. Brother, you are here too? Can you lend me a hand to block it? Pegasus Sindma opened one eye, glanced at the timid elf with disdain, and moved to a position for Rohan to hide. Rohan hurriedly hid behind Sindma. The two great gods had already started fighting. The sparks of divine power flying everywhere were not something he could resist at the moment. In the center of the palace, an outrageous battle between two goddesses for a poor male believer was about to begin. Continent Imperial Harbor Rohan, who was slacking off in the battle at the moment, didn't know that every second he wasted in the void was torture for the warriors in the outside world. At this time, over Imperial Harbor, turbid dark clouds enveloped the entire city, and the streets were filled with farmers with families. They were villagers from nearby. Just a few days ago, the believers of the snake cult within the control of the elves suddenly began to gather, and hundreds of thousands of huge armies marched towards Imperial Harbor. Since the Teutonic Knights were arranged to patrol and monitor in advance, Dario began to prepare for war. When the snake cult began to gather, the 12-meter high city wall was piled with thunderwood rolling stones, and countless boxes filled with crossbows and javelins were neatly placed in the city walls, providing a steady stream of firepower for the warriors at any time. Dario stood on the city wall, looking down at the endless tents below, and asked the quartermaster beside him, how much equipment and logistical supplies do we have, and how long can the food last? Governor, because the event was too sudden, we only had time to make 900 crossbows and 120,000 arrows, and we only prepared less than 10,000 javelins, but we have no shortage of thunderstones and rolling logs. In addition, we ensure that every recruit can receive armor and a shield. Although they are just some simple leather and cloth armor, they should be enough. The quartermaster reported to Dario a little nervously. He was just a human who had never come into contact with elves. He was very afraid that Dario would chop him because of his lack of preparation. Fortunately, Dario was not an unreasonable person. He also knew that the preparations were too hasty, so he did not blame them, but continued to ask, where is the food? There are about 30,000 people in the city now, including the refugees. How long will our food last? Because we can still fish from the port, so according to the minimum supply, we can still last for more than half a year. The quartermaster was still very confident about the food problem. After all, there were still some fields and fish ponds inside the city, and it was a self-sufficient city in itself. Although there were 10,000 or 20,000 more refugees, the pressure on logistics in the short term was not too serious. Of course, this was also thanks to the fact that Rohan did not burn the granary when he attacked the city, so there was plenty of surplus food in the city. Dario looked at the snake cult believers who were carrying wood to build siege equipment outside. The lower floors of several siege towers had been completed. It had been 2 months since Lord Rohan left last time. Logically, Rohan would check the situation of each world every month and would not delay for so long. It seems that it's not just me. Albion or Grand Town should also be in trouble, right? Touching the sword at his waist, Dario was filled with emotion. This was the reward he received when he swore allegiance to Rohan. It was an ordinary but well-made rapier. Putting his hand on the hilt, looking at the phoenix feather pattern on it that symbolized Rohan, Dario's eyes were full of determination. Come on, rebellious thief, I will use this sword to cut your throats one by one, crush your intestines, and irrigate this city with your blood. Chapter 121 Dilemma. Pandworld. Half a year later, attack the city gate. A humanoid warrior wearing thick dark green plate armor was holding up a nail hammer and roaring to the soldiers around him. The trembling voice, full of tearing, was enough to make the mortals around him feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. Facing this terrifying warrior who was nearly 2 meters tall, no one dared to disobey his orders. He was a VIP warrior blessed by the female snake god. Because of the favor of the snake god, these warriors were covered with fine scales all over their bodies. Even without wearing plate armor, it was difficult for ordinary mortal weapons to penetrate their hard scales. Coupled with the huge power of the grace of God, they became a veritable meat grinder on the battlefield. This young VIP who had just arrived in Penn from the southern continent was standing on a boulder, commanding the believers around him like a commander. He was a new VIP. After receiving the order from the snake god, he came to the distant Pend in order to enjoy this feeling of being under one person and above 10,000 people. Hurry up, push the battering ram. At this time, the newly promoted VIP who had just arrived outside the Imperial port was standing arrogantly on the stone and did not notice the pitiful eyes of his fellow VIPs hiding behind the wooden frames and shields. They were all veterans who had participated in the battle for more than half a year. The fact that they were able to survive the war with Druki showed their strong skills. At the same time, 2 Cobra warriors standing guard in the camp were looking at the VIP showing off on the boulder, chatting with each other. Want to bet? 1 gold coin. I think it will take about 30 seconds. Then I bet 1 minute, but it should have come a long time ago. Why is there no movement? Don't worry, he won't be arrogant for long. The Cobras who have not yet been fully blessed are still human bodies, so they are quite dissatisfied with the behavior of the new officials who are in office. The new VIP seemed to notice these Cobras. As a newly promoted man, he was qualified to command them, so he couldn't help but want to come over and mock them. Hey, you guys, go and move the siege hammer immediately, I want. As soon as he finished speaking, a red arrow pierced his helmet and hit him in the forehead. Looking at the body of the new VIP slowly falling from the boulder, the VIP veterans shook their heads and continued to hide in the shadows to wipe their weapons. The 6-month siege had already made them afraid of the almost terrifying elven archers in the city. On the wall of Dillingang, Lysadillan slowly put down the red emerald bow in his hand and picked up the monocular telescope to monitor the boulder hundreds of meters away. Looking at the bodies falling in the distance, he couldn't help but complain to Dario, who was drinking water and resting behind him. Is this the 6th one who dares to show up this month? Why are there more and more idiots like this recently? I guess we have killed all the veterans. These should be the new recruits who came to reinforce. It seems that the snake cult can no longer hold on. Really? I don't believe it. I feel that we should be the first to give up, right? The long-term closed life made Lysadillan, who already yearned for freedom, gradually turned to complaining. Looking at the hungry refugees in the city, he said, maybe we have eaten all the fish nearby? Even we haven't eaten meat for a long time, not to mention these refugees who can't even get enough food. So what, can they still rebel? Dario took a deep breath. At present, all the food is being supplied to the Durachi warriors and the Teutonic Knights first. How can there be any extra? Even those recruits who have transformed into excellent warriors can only barely eat rice balls to fill their stomachs, not to mention the refugees who are of no use at all. However, even so, many captains of the Mandrachi group reported to him that some elves had begun to dislike the gradually decreasing food rations. On the other side of the city, the War Hydra was feasting on the pile of corpses. As the only one who didn't have to worry about starvation, 1K seemed to have arrived in the snake paradise. In order to prevent the spread of the disease, fresh corpses were transported to it every day, and it even shed its skin because it ate too much. There were several times when the city gates were breached, and it was 1K who used his huge body and flaming breath to block the swarming enemies, so he naturally received the most food supplies. Looking at the lifeless scene in the city, Dario couldn't help but sigh again. Is Lord Rohan really in danger? Or did those unfaithful captains say that they were forgotten? Just when Dario was a little erratic about the future, a shriek came from the sentry tower. Enemy attack. Damn it, it's coming again. Dario picked up a javelin angrily, and the surrounding Frangi people also took out their scimitars and prepared for battle. Their gunpowder weapons had been used up in the long battle, and now they could only rely on their skilled combat skills to survive. Looking at the soldiers who were almost all injured, Dario sighed for the third time and slowly aimed his javelin at the enemies all over the mountains. Lord Rohan, if you still remember me, and the adjutant who was loyal to you, then come and support us quickly. In the void, in the temple of Lilith, come on. Come on. The battle between the two goddesses had lasted for several days, and Rohan leaned on the soft fur of Sindma and kept cheering for Rajlia. During the battle, he did not think about going up to help and tried to sneak attack Lilith with a lion's fang. But Lilith shattered the lion's fang with a palm and then smiled sweetly at him playfully, and Rohan immediately understood his current identity as a mascot. Helplessly, Rohan could only stay aside and serve as Rajlia's human buff endurance device. Since he didn't know the speed of time outside, Rohan didn't feel anxious at this time. Instead, he watched the battle between the goddesses with great interest. Hehe, women are the most interesting, especially the gossips between the two women from time to time, which made Rohan and Sindma next to him dumbfounded. No way. Lady Misty is really a novice? I thought the elves were all very playful. Wow, she actually ripped clothes. Look at Lilith's broad mind. Her future children and husband will not starve to death. Huh. Rohan and Sindma hid in the corner, one man and one horse excitedly eavesdropping on the gossip between the gods. Especially the tearing of clothes and hair that women like to use. Although it is not often used, the holy light that is revealed every time opens Rohan's eyes. Yeah, fight. You can fight. Why are you getting closer and closer? After an unknown amount of time, Lilith suddenly pulled away from the battle and then rushed straight towards Rohan and Sindma. The longer they fought, the more she felt something was wrong. Wasn't her target Rohan? Why do we have to waste time here? I won't be polite to your believers. Take it. Lilith jumped on the back of the horse and reached out to Rohan, who had not yet reacted, ready to take Rohan away by force again. But how could Rajlia let her do what she wanted? Put him down, swordman. The sound of tearing, the sound of the space breaking scared Lilith so much that she hurriedly retracted her hand that was grabbing Rohan. The unstoppable divine spear directly penetrated the palace and flew towards the distant galaxy. If she hadn't stopped just now, I'm afraid her arm would have been broken. No, the wind is strong. Rohan also came to his senses and rolled and crawled towards Rajlia. He didn't want to be abducted by the good Aunt Lilith. Once again, Rohan felt an unprecedented sense of security. Half kneeling on the ground, he hugged her thighs and thanked her. Thank you for your help, ma'am. Then he took the opportunity to hug the inside of her thighs, feeling the goddess' smooth and delicate skin, and couldn't help but make a face at Lilith not far away. Lulu didn't expect it. Hit me. PS. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I finally did the extra chapter 1 promise to my book friends cack. I have to go to bed first. I can't bear it anymore. Chapter 122 end. It seems that everything is over. Rajlia looked at the flying white horse going away and slowly put away the spear in her hand. After so many years, she finally surpassed Lilith. Then she looked at Rohan, who was rubbing her thigh crazily, touched his head nonchalantly and smiled. How long are you going to touch? Dear Lady of the Mist, we have successfully driven Lilith away. In order to avoid this situation in the future, I think I should improve my strength. Seeing that his little action was discovered, Rohan hurriedly stood up and asked seriously if there was any way to improve his strength. In the battles of the past few days, he at least dealt 0.01% of verbal mental damage, which was more or less an assist. He should be able to get a small reward, right? Apart from anything else, how about giving him a god's choice? Looking at Rohan with expectation in his eyes, Rajlia didn't say much. After all, Lilith did that kind of thing with Rohan in front of her, which made her feel betrayed. Although Rohan was in a coma at the time, this NTR feeling still made Rajlia feel a little bit uncomfortable. Damn, my believer is dirty. Seeing that Lady Mist had no reaction, Rohan couldn't help but poke her big white legs with his fingers, ready to ask what happened. Suddenly, the mithril chain at Rohan's feet began to slide violently like a waking venomous snake, and before Rohan could react, it stabbed his chest with the tip. Warning. The host's soul is damaged, and emergency repairs are about to begin. Whoa, fuck. In the shadows, Lilith's figure slowly appeared, looking at the chain that pierced Rohan's chest. A sweet smile hung on the corner of her mouth. She is the goddess of the moon, but also the god of illusion. Although Rajlia's strength is comparable to hers, she still can't see through her illusion. Hello, handsome boy, I won't be polite with your soul. Why are you so lingering? Just as Lilith was about to use the chain to forcibly pull Rohan and his soul away, Rajlia on the side had already reacted. Seeing Rohan pierced through the chest, Rajlia's heart once again rose with anger, and the divine spear was thrown at Lilith again. However, Lilith had been prepared. Her goal was not to take Rohan away, but to take away a piece of his soul fragment, which was enough. Lilith easily dodged the spear, and then pulled the chain hard, instantly bringing out a large piece of flesh and blood and a small piece of soul fragment emitting pure white light. Warning. The host's body and soul are severely torn. Yes, I feel it too. Rohan ignored the series of prompts from the system. Lilith's sneak attack directly tore out his heart and soul, and the unprecedented pain made him numb all over. In order to win Isabel's true love, Rohan once dug out his heart and offered it to her, but that was after taking a lot of painkillers. Rohan hurriedly wanted to summon the rebirth pill from the system space, but the life value on the panel was about to return to zero. Damn it, it's going to be wasted in such a place. Even the rebirth pills that he took temporarily could not quickly repair Rohan's injuries. He was forced to prepare to drink his trump card, primary life potion. As long as he drinks it, 18% of his blood volume will be restored instantly, which is enough to reverse the current situation. Suddenly, Rohan's peripheral vision fell on Rajlia, who was rushing over not far away, and a crazy idea suddenly popped up in his mind. Hey, isn't this a good opportunity to cheat the plugin? The last time I pretended to be dead in front of Isabel, I successfully tricked her, living saint, to bless me. This time, after fighting side by side for so long, if I'm lucky, I might be promoted as an exception and become a missed god's choice. What's more, although the blessing spirit has expired, the characteristics of scum love like blood are still there. The lady shouldn't just watch him die without helping, right? Thinking of this, Rohan hurriedly took a few more rebirth pills, and after his health bar dropped to a certain balance, he pretended to be weak and stretched out his hand to Lady Mist and said, "Lady, I can't do it anymore. Please remember my love for you." After that, Rohan fainted because his health bar reached the bottom, and his consciousness returned to the system space again, waiting for resurrection with great expectation. As long as he could become the chosen one, he could solve the war in Albion as soon as possible and concentrate on solving the demons and snake worship in Penda. Rohan was relieved to hand his body to Rajlia, ready to cheat the other party's blessing, but Rajlia didn't think so. Why does this feeling seem familiar? Looking at Rohan's pale body lying on the ground, Rajlia first cast a holy light to repair the wound on his chest, then picked him up as a princess and used the portal to return to the Temple of Iris. Warhammer World. Iris Rohan's body was lightly placed on the bed by Rajlia. Looking at this poor believer who was killed by Lilith for her, Rajlia's heart was full of emotion. She had vaguely guessed that Rohan was pretending to be pitiful to deceive the blessing, but she was kind-hearted and couldn't refuse this pity. After all, the cause of the incident was that she was accidentally caught by Lilith, and Rohan, whose soul was damaged, was just an unlucky guy who was implicated. In this case, how about compensating him? First of all, it is impossible to be chosen by God for the time being. After all, Iltharion, who is also a believer, has worked hard for thousands of years and has not been chosen by her. And you, a Durachi who has only believed for a few years, were suddenly promoted to the chosen of the Lady of the Mist. What do the elves of Ulthuan think? But now Rohan is already a living saint, and his strength has reached the pinnacle of mortals. How can he be strengthened? Speaking of which, if it's Lilith, how will she reward her believers? Glancing at Rohan's pale face due to excessive blood loss, Rajlia sighed, slowly took off her veil, revealing her beautiful face. Then she carried the unconscious Rohan to the big bed of Rajlia that could replenish divine power and lay down together. Sleep well, and when you wake up, all your worries will be gone. Touching Rohan's soft face, Rajlia slowly closed her eyes. This time she also felt the insufficiency of her own strength. Taking this opportunity, she must seize the time to improve herself. Rohan, who was nestled in Rajlia's arms, seemed to feel that the divine power was nourishing his body, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Rohan, who stayed in the system space, once again missed the opportunity to feast his eyes. At this moment, he was listening to the system prompts that kept coming from his ears with a confused look on his face. Ding. Congratulations to the host for sleeping with the Lady of the Mist and obtaining a new feature. The gods favored can temporarily convert the magic power in the body into the power of the goddess of the mist, which lasts for 30 seconds and has a cooldown of 1 day. Ding. Congratulations to the host for getting the first kiss of a goddess and starting the artifact mission, the Cry of the Goddess. Mission requirements: unify the continent of Pendor. 0/5 kill all the gods of the continent of Pendor and sacrifice their divine power to the Lady of the Mist. 1/11. The Cry of the Goddess. Active skill: Casadora Comet. Obtained features: longevity, armor strength, plus 20 melee defense, plus 10%. Looking at the almost terrifying strength bonus of the Cry of the Goddess, Rohan fell silent. His mind full of gratitude for the blessing of the Lady of the Mist. He even forgot for a moment that he had unknowingly gotten Ms. Mist's first kiss. After a moment, he suddenly looked up and said in shock, "What the hell? What first kiss?" P.S. It's time to continue with the main story. I swear I will never be a fool again, and Cease will only do cack in the group. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123: The Passage of Time. Whoa, where am I? Rohan opened his eyes in confusion, looking at the somewhat familiar ceiling. The first thing he did was to lick his lips. Damn, except for a faint fragrance, there was no feeling at all. Don't you see, the blood of the bear goddess can break the curse. Who knows if the goddess's saliva has the effect of strengthening the body? Smelling the same body fragrance as Ms. Misty, Rohan touched his lips with some regret, got out of bed, and prepared to check the situation nearby. Fortunately, the Shangfang sword that he lost in the battle was placed at the head of the bed, so Rohan took the sword and left the room directly. Pushing open the door, what came into view was a familiar yet slightly strange garden. Looking at the vines on the surrounding walls and some messy grass, Rohan frowned. How come this layout looks like the palace garden of Lion Lake City? When there was no one around, Isabel liked to take Rohan for a walk in this garden. Sometimes she would do other things when she was deeply in love. Therefore, Rohan was quite familiar with this garden full of his and Isabel's footprints. Looking at the empty garden and the flowers that were a little withered because no one had taken care of them for a long time, Rohan secretly became alert and murmured, "It's only been a few days? How come it has become so messy?" Looking at the empty bedroom, Rohan was ready to activate God's favored one at any time. Is this an illusion or reality? Where are the guards? Isn't it the duty of the Silver Mist guards to protect the palace? Where have they gone? Putting his hand on the hilt of the sword, Rohan began to walk towards the palace hall, while constantly looking around the somewhat dilapidated royal castle. The armory that was once decorated with gorgeous plate armor and swords was now empty, leaving only dusty wooden racks alone in the warehouse. The longbow guards who used to patrol the castle had all disappeared. As the most famous archers in the kingdom of Croist, no one had ever heard of them leaving their posts without permission. Coming to the empty hall, and looking at the silent castle, Rohan could not help shouting, "Is anyone there?" After howling for a while, an old guard with a slightly hunched figure finally walked in with a spear on his shoulder, cursing, "Who dares to make a noise here? Lord Rohan? Ghost." Looking at Rohan, who was wearing a white single garment and holding a silver sword in his hand, the old guard was so scared that he quickly raised his spear, pointed at Rohan and said tremblingly, "Lord Rohan, I have never done anything to let down Lady Mist in my life. You must not take me away." "What are you talking about?" Looking at the old guard in front of him who was trembling, as if he had seen a ghost, Rohan could not help scratching his head. He had only been out for a few days, why did he come back like this? Seeing that Rohan seemed to be a real person, the old guard bravely came to Rohan, and then cried with tears, "Oh my god. Lord Rohan, you are finally back. Calm down. Tell me what happened. Why is this place so deserted? Have you forgotten? You have disappeared for almost a year, and everyone thought you were killed by Roderick, the giant king of the kingdom of Calantis." The queen was very angry and gathered the power of the whole country to launch a war against the kingdom of Calantis, but Roderick led the giant army to continuously attack cities, so the queen had to move the palace to the front line. Rohan frowned and listened to the old guard's story of what happened in the past year. Lilith really hurt him a lot and made him waste so much time. Let alone other things, more than half a year has passed. In the Warhammer world alone, would Lord Witch King think that he died in another world and took back Grand Town? And in the Pender continent, Rohan only knew that a snake worship army was attacking the city of Boshi, and Ario's troops were all recruits. Not to mention that now, Isabel is personally leading the troops to the front line. Can the once innocent and lovely princess really handle the battlefield? Thinking of this, Rohan's heart was filled with anxiety, and he was eager to go to the battlefield. For the first time, he was so eager to have a flying beast, so that he could carry him directly to the front line. Thinking of this, Rohan anxiously ran towards the armory outside the castle, and the old guard followed him breathlessly. Since Rohan could only open the portal in places he had been to in person, he could only ride a horse to rush to the front line without a location. However, when Rohan arrived at the stable, he saw only a few skinny pack horses in it. He was so angry that he grabbed the old guard and asked, "Where are the horses for traveling? Why are there no travel horses?" "My lord, because the front line is in urgent need of war horses. A large number of high quality horses have been transported to the front line, and the rest are some draft horses for farming." Damn it. These ordinary pack horses simply couldn't take him far. After all, as a living saint, he had unlimited endurance and might be able to run faster than these horses. Thinking of this, Rohan simply took out a cloak from the system space and put it on, then hurriedly ran to the street market outside the castle. He didn't believe that the whole city would have no means of transportation. Sure enough, he saw a young farmer wearing a hood sitting on the ground helplessly by the side of the road, and a sturdy white horse was next to him. "Oh my god. Lady Mist, I actually lost the carriage, so is worthless. Are you short of money? Take this purse, and the horse belongs to me." "Ah, elf. This is too much." Looking at the purse full of silver coins in his hand, the young farmer raised his head in fear, but only saw Rohan riding his horse and disappearing. Looking at the purse in his hand, the young farmer slowly took off his hood, revealing his handsome face. His name is Jack. It stands to reason that he is the lucky child of this world. He is the one who will find the magic beans, win the beautiful and rich lady, and reach the pinnacle of life. Unfortunately, as a poor farmer, he may never have the chance to know that Rohan has taken away the princess and the throne that originally belonged to him. At this time, Rohan did not know that he had passed by the protagonist of the story. Even if he knew, he would not care. Now he just wanted to rush to the front line. With a whip on the horse's butt, Rohan kept driving the horse to gallop on the avenue, and said on the horse's back, "Ansel, right? Come on, run. If you die, I will give you a rebirth pill to keep running. You must come on. In this way, one man and one horse galloped quickly on the avenue. The elf seers made the militia at the checkpoints dare not stop him at all. He only needed to run day and night for a few days, and he would reach the front line. Isabel, you must wait for me. Chapter 124 Isabel's Transformation. Since the kingdom of Calantis has received assistance from the giants, the Albion continent has now completely become a situation of two kings competing for hegemony. Although Anj has promised to follow Isabel's arrangements, in most cases, the Penvassal army and the Teutonic Knights are still the main force. After all, without Rohan's portal to replenish the troops, the more soldiers of the Durachi die, the less he will waste his own lives. In the eyes of Anj and those captains, they have not received clear orders from Rohan at present, so they will just work without effort. Frontline, Winter Castle. This castle used to be a common transportation hub for 5 countries. The local lord was once a baron with his own troops, but he had already died in the mouth of a giant. In order to gain a strategic advantage in advance, Isabel ignored the so-called traditional glory and directly used a trick to lure the teenage successor lord to fight her alone, and then strangled him with vines. With such means, Isabel divided the castle into her own sphere of influence before Roderick. The current battle is mainly around this castle. Giants are coming. After hearing the shouts of the sentinels, the defenders rushed up to the city wall with longbows, and dozens of crossbows were already ready. In order to support this war of unification, she mobilized the resources of the whole country, built a large number of giant crossbows that could penetrate the armor and skin of giants, and turned each castle into a solid fortress. At the highest point of the castle, Isabel, wearing a close-fitting plate armor decorated with green leaves, held a staff and observed the situation below. After more than half a year of actual combat training, she is no longer the simple wight who only knew how to nestle in Rohan's arms and knew nothing about war. Seeing that the crossbowmen on the city wall have entered their respective positions, Isabel turned her eyes to the distance, with a hint of hatred in her eyes. There is her mortal enemy, Roderick and his giant army. Hundreds of giants wearing various iron armors are standing on the plains, holding various wooden sticks and sledgehammers in their hands, which look amazingly powerful. The most important thing is that almost every giant holds a wooden shield made of hundreds of trees in his arms. Although it looks simple and fragile, it can well resist the damage of the crossbow. In this protracted battle, it is not only Isabel who is constantly growing, even the giants are constantly growing and learning. Through the telescope, Isabel easily found a large sedan chair behind the giant army, on which sat a disgusting man with unshaven beard. As if he noticed Isabel's surveillance, the man turned his head and waved slightly in Isabel's direction to provoke. Domineering, looking for death. Roderick, every time I see your stinky face, it only makes my hatred in my heart swell a little. After slowly putting down the telescope, Isabel's beautiful eyes kept flashing green electric light, which was her uncontrollable magic. Since Rohan disappeared, she has attributed all the responsibility to her own weakness and failure to protect her lover. Since the loss of contact with the Mist Lady, she has taught herself to explore magic independently, and now has mastered and developed several magics specifically for giants. Outside the city wall, Roderick, wearing a glittering crown, stood up from his chair and shouted to the giants in front of him, "Launch an attack. This time we must take down Winterberg in one fell swoop." The domination crown emitted a faint magical power. The leading two-headed giant shook his head in pain, then picked up the meteor hammer, raised his shield, and shouted to the giants behind him, "Ferry, far, no, fam. Blow the horn, rush into the city, and enjoy a feast of human flesh." Woo woo woo. The deafening giant horn was blown, and the two-headed giant looked down at Roderick, who sat back in the chair and couldn't help but grit his teeth secretly. His name is Farron, a general of the giant kingdom 1,000 years ago. Since King Eric killed their king and used the crown to control them to return to Gangshire, he has been the one who led the giants. However, a year ago, Roderick came to Gangshire with the magic beans obtained by sacrificing his nephew, and forced them to fight on the ground with the crown. The giant soldiers under his command didn't care. Anyway, as long as they could come down to Earth to eat humans, it would be the best motivation for them. But he didn't want to give up his 1,000-year-old ruling position for nothing. behind the giant army. Roderick was happily eating grapes from a maid. Seeing that Fallon was staring at him, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and said, "General Fallon, I think the front line needs your command now. Do you want to watch your giant brothers die in vain?" "Yes, King." The oppression from the crown made Fallon's face hideous, and the little head beside him screamed in pain. He had no choice but to rush to the front line with the meteor Warhammer. In Winter Castle, looking at the giants rushing towards the castle, Isabel slowly raised her staff and chanted expressionlessly, "Father of Thorns, listen to my call." On the staff, the amber crystal with 6 magic beams integrated into it emitted bursts of green light, flying towards the plain outside the city wall like raindrops. Huolala. Countless sharp defense lines composed of thorns and thorns gradually rose up, and the sharp saw teeth and spear-like sharp tips were enough to make the souls of every giant who stepped on them bloody. As expected, these giants who had no way to wear shoes due to their huge bodies, could only stop in front of the hundreds of meters long sea of thorns and smash the thorns with their weapons. After fighting for more than half a year, both Isabel and the giants were quite familiar with each other's moves, so they could naturally think of a way to crack them. And Isabel's goal was to slow down the giants' attack speed. Looking at the giants advancing slowly below, she ordered the crossbowmen, "Aim at those giants without shields and shoot arrows. Shoot." Bang 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 bang. After receiving the order, the crossbowmen raised the muzzles of their guns and continuously shot huge crossbow arrows at the slow-moving giants. The rain of arrows from above flew directly towards the giants, who were slowly advancing in the thorn bushes, and easily penetrated the crudely made iron armor on the giants. "We can't passively take the beating, we must find a way to fight back. Shields. We need more shields. Speed up the cleanup, we must get to the bottom of the city wall quickly." Several giants were shot in the vitals, and fell to the ground screaming. The vibration caused was like an earthquake, which scared Roderick, who was eating grapes from the maid in the distance. Pushing the flushed maid away, Roderick looked at the howling giants with dissatisfaction, and couldn't help cursing in a low voice, "Damn giants, I have provided so much equipment and assistance, and you can't even do this. P.S. I swear, try not to add too many words cack." Chapter 125, Battle of Winterberg. Roderick cursed. The food of these hundreds of giants was enough to feed an army of more than 10,000 people. In order to improve their fighting power, he also asked the people to cut down a large number of trees in the cold north to make shields, in order to strengthen the fighting power of the giants. Now in the country, the people complained about his mandatory orders, and the nobles had ulterior motives because of his regicide. If it weren't for the fact that he had a giant army, I'm afraid the situation in the country would have become a scene of vitality and everything competing. I thought he would be invincible with black magic and the giant army, but I didn't expect to meet Isabel, who also used magic. Looking at the giants who couldn't move because of the thorn bushes, Roderick couldn't help but sigh. He really didn't want to fight with Isabel. Black magic energy floated out from Roderick. His body trembled uncontrollably, his eyes showed a trace of red light, and he chanted, "Lord of Darkness, transform your aging rage into the flames of world destruction and burn my enemies." After reciting the spell, Roderick immediately collapsed on the chair, enduring the pain all over his body. The maids beside him seemed to be accustomed to it, and handed him wine and grapes for him to enjoy. After all, this is a low magic world. Every time he used black magic, Roderick could feel a tearing feeling in his soul. It was a groan from his mortal body that could not withstand the side effects of magic. After drinking several large glasses of wine in a row, Roderick's trembling gradually subsided. He threw the wine glass aside fiercely and looked at the front line. Although the process of releasing black magic was very painful, its unparalleled strength was worth the price. A red flame suddenly spread from the thorn bush, devouring the surrounding plants like a fire snake, and spreading towards the castle. Soon, the thorn bushes outside the castle were burned into a pile of ashes, and the giants stepped on the hot ground, howling and rushing towards the city wall. Ha ha ha. Go ahead, burn, kill and plunder to your heart's content. Seeing this, Roderick finally let it go, and arrogantly raised his glass to Isabel on the high tower of Winter Castle. Because he was not well trained, this was one of the few large-scale magics that Roderick could use, but because the fire attribute naturally restrained Isabel's plants, he always had the upper hand. It took only a dozen seconds for these giants to rush to the bottom of the city wall at a distance of hundreds of meters and frantically smashed the ironclad city gate with the hammers and maces in their hands. Anj stood on the city wall, raised a javelin, and threw it at the giant. The sharp spearhead directly hit the eye of a giant, causing him to scream in pain. Seeing more and more giants coming to the city wall, Anj continued to throw javelins, while shouting to the crossbowmen around him, "Hurry up and get rid of the giants at the city gate. Don't let the giants climb up the city wall." The muzzles of several crossbows slowly turned to the city gate, and hundreds of armor-piercing arrows shot out from the muzzles in an instant, sweeping the giants below. Roar! The rain of arrows instantly covered the giants who were hammering the city gate. Even with the protection of shields, several giants died in the sudden attack. The other giants seemed to be afraid and retreated a little. They dared not climb the city walls without authorization, but slowly retreated out of the range. For a while, the giants' offensive seemed to be temporarily relieved, which made some soldiers gradually let down their guard. "Druchi, get off the city wall." But Anj frowned and began to call on the Druchi warriors who were originally helping to defend the city to retreat to the city wall. The 1-year war made him realize that these giants were just as treacherous as his fellow shadows, so he would not risk the lives of elves. As expected, when all the giants left the range of the crossbow, a burst of air-breaking sound suddenly came. Boom. The crossbow that was originally on the city wall was suddenly hit accurately by a huge stone as big as a millstone, and was instantly smashed to pieces. The huge stone was still powerful and directly smashed through the marble wall in the inner castle. On the high tower, Isabel frowned and picked up the telescope. Sure enough, she saw a giant holding a slingshot among the giants, loading it. The giant was seen putting the stone on the rubber band, made of an unknown creature, and then directly pulled the rubber band and aimed it at the wall of Wender Castle hundreds of meters away. The extremely tough rubber band was easily pulled to nearly 10 meters long, and the huge stone shot out could easily hit the house thousands of meters away, not to mention the city wall hundreds of meters away. Looking at the Winterberg, that had no power to fight back due to the range problem, the giant's mouth curled up a little ferociously and murmured in a dull voice, "These humans are much weaker than before. Where is their damn magic? Fam, don't waste time. You don't want to be hungry again, right? Maybe we can take the opportunity to eat a few people while attacking the city now." Fallon, holding a meteor hammer, glanced at Roderick sitting in the back while provoking the relationship between the giants and each other and urging Fam. After hearing Fallon's words, Fam's eyes really flashed with dissatisfaction with Roderick, and he loosened the rubber band angrily. After listening to Fallon's provocation, the surrounding giants also swallowed their saliva and began to feel dissatisfied with Roderick, who forcibly controlled them. All giants are very greedy for human flesh, but Roderick always does not allow them to hunt everywhere, and even does not allow them to eat prisoners of war. More importantly, they are strong and agile, and are better at field combat, but Roderick ignored the casualties of the giants, and forced them to attack the heavily defended city. Seeing that the giants around him were increasingly dissatisfied with Roderick's rule, a smile appeared on both of Fallon's heads. "Suppress it. Suppress your anger, and when you vent it, it will be enough to destroy the entire Albion." With the advantage of range, the crossbows on the wall were basically cleared out, and the giants launched an attack again. Isabel on the tower looked at the giants rushing towards the castle, pointed her staff at the ashes outside the wall and shouted, "Muddy swamp." A green beam of light flew out of the staff in an instant, drew a graceful arc in the air, and fell directly on the charred land. The giants who were originally charging fell into the sudden quagmire one after another. Because of their huge bodies, they were unable to get out of it for a while. After releasing 2 large-scale spells in succession, Isabel leaned on her staff somewhat weakly and shouted to the messenger below the city, "Put the longbowmen on the city wall and try to kill more giants before they cross the swamp. P.S. Forgive me for being so slow. I'm dismantling the bed today, Kak." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.